Welcome back to another night of Reddit stories while we explore this peaceful Minecraft world together. There's something oddly satisfying about discovering your husband has been selling your intimate moments behind your back, and then watching his entire life crumble as a result. The audacity is breathtaking, isn't it? Now, before we begin, just a quick shout out to the people who have been showing up actively to comment and support this channel. Thank you so much. It helps me more than you guys think. I read all of the comments and it really motivates me to keep going. Tonight, we've gathered some truly shocking stories of privacy violations and the sweet, sweet karma that followed. Our first story introduces us to a woman who thought her marriage was rock solid until a message from a stranger changed everything. I thought my marriage to Derek was absolutely perfect. We had been together for 6 years, married for 4, and honestly, I felt like I'd won the lottery. He was attentive, supportive of my career, and we still had that spark that made me feel like the luckiest woman alive. We lived in a nice suburban neighborhood, had weekly date nights, and were even starting to discuss having kids in the next year or two. That all came crashing down when I received a strange message request on social media from a woman named Allison. I didn't recognize her name, but her profile showed she worked at the same tech company as Derek. I accepted the request, thinking maybe she was organizing a surprise for him or something. "I'm really sorry to message you like this," she wrote. "I've been debating whether to reach out for weeks, but I feel like you deserve to know. Some of the guys at work have been sharing videos of you. Intimate videos. I overheard them talking about buying new ones from Derek last week. At first, I thought it was some kind of sick joke or she had the wrong person. There's no way my Derek, the man who surprised me with breakfast in bed on random Tuesdays and cried during our wedding vows, would do something so violating. I thanked her for the information but told her she must be mistaken. I wish I was," she replied, sending screenshots of a group chat where Derek's name was clearly visible, discussing new content and payment methods. My stomach dropped as I realized she was telling the truth. I spent the next day in a complete daze. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything. I took a sick day from work and waited until Derek left for the office before starting to dig. It didn't take long to find the evidence. Derek had a hidden folder on his laptop labeled work stuff that contained dozens of intimate videos of us. Some I remembered taking together, but others I had no recollection of at all. They appeared to be filmed without my knowledge during moments I thought were private between husband and wife. The folder also contained a spreadsheet. This is where it went from heartbreaking to absolutely sickening. He had meticulously tracked payments from at least 8 different coworkers, dating back nearly 3 years. Each video was priced at $50, with premium content, which I discovered meant videos where I was unaware of being recorded, going for $75. There were notes about requests for specific content and future filming opportunities. I felt physically ill reading through it all. This man, who I had trusted completely, had been violating me and profiting from it for years. The betrayal was so profound I couldn't even cry. I just felt numb. I made copies of everything and contacted a lawyer that same day. My attorney was horrified and assured me we had enough evidence for both divorce proceedings and potential criminal charges. She advised me to confront Derek, but to record the conversation for evidence. That night when Derek came home, I had my phone recording in my pocket. I asked him directly about selling videos of me to his coworkers. The look on his face, that flash of panic before he composed himself, told me everything I needed to know. "What are you talking about?" he said with a nervous laugh. "Who told you that?" I mentioned that someone from his work had reached out, and his demeanor immediately changed. He went from denial to minimization in the blink of an eye. "Look, it's just guy stuff," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "Everyone shares that kind of thing these days. You're making it into something it's not. You've been charging them money, Derek, for years," he scoffed. "So what? It's not like they don't already know what you look like, and honestly, you should be flattered they're willing to pay." Flattered. He actually used that word, as if I should be grateful that he had violated my trust and privacy in the most intimate way possible. "They're just videos," he continued, his voice hardening. "You're seriously overreacting right now. And here's where it gets absurd. He tried to turn it around on me, claiming I was invading his privacy by looking through his computer. The man who had been secretly filming and selling videos of me was lecturing me about privacy boundaries. The absolute audacity left me speechless. I didn't sleep in our bedroom that night. I locked myself in the guest room and cried until I had no tears left. The next morning, I called in sick again and met with my lawyer to review our options. Then came the breaking point. While Derek was at work, I checked his phone and discovered something that made everything even worse. Some of the videos were from moments I had no idea were being recorded. Intimate moments when I thought we were just being ourselves. Times when I was vulnerable or playful because I thought it was just between us. He had hidden cameras in our bedroom, bathroom, and even captured footage when we were on vacation. Places where I felt safe and secure, he had turned into his personal filming studio. That was it for me. There was no coming back from this. My lawyer helped me gather all the evidence we needed, including the recorded confession. I filed for divorce the following week, citing emotional abuse and invasion of privacy. But I wasn't content just to leave him. What he had done wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage. It was a crime. With my lawyer's guidance, I sent the evidence of Derek's little side business to his company's HR department, including the recording where he admitted to selling the videos to coworkers. The response was swift. Derek was fired immediately for creating a hostile work environment and violating company policies. Several of his coworkers who had purchased the videos were also disciplined or terminated. The divorce proceedings moved quickly, as Derek's lawyer advised him to settle rather than fight a battle he would surely lose. I received a substantial settlement, including our house and a significant portion of our joint assets. The judge was particularly unsympathetic to Derek's case when presented with evidence of his business venture, but that wasn't the end of it. My lawyer also helped me file criminal charges against Derek for revenge porn and violation of privacy laws. He was eventually convicted on multiple counts and received both probation and a hefty fine. His reputation was destroyed, and he ended up moving to another state to try to escape the fallout. It's been 2 years since everything happened. I've spent a lot of time in therapy, working through the trauma of such a profound betrayal. I've sold the house, too many tainted memories, and moved to a new city where I've slowly started rebuilding my life. The most meaningful thing to come out of this nightmare is that I've started a support group for victims of intimate image abuse. What happened to me was extreme, but so many people have experienced similar violations. Creating a safe space for survivors to share their stories and support each other has been healing for all of us. I still have trust issues, understandably, but I'm working on it. I've even started dating again recently, very cautiously, of course. My new rule is absolutely no photos or videos of any kind, which any decent person completely understands. Mid-roll CTA. If you've made it this far into the chaos, you're as addicted to Reddit drama as I am. Make sure to subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. And stick around. The next story will make your jaw drop even harder. The worst part wasn't just the betrayal. It was discovering some videos were from moments I thought were just between us. Those private, vulnerable times that should have been sacred were turned into commodities. But nothing compared to what I found next. I finally broke up with Ryan after 2 years of what I can only describe as emotional warfare. He was the textbook definition of controlling, constantly checking my phone, dictating who I could hang out with, even commenting on what I wore or ate. It started so subtly I barely noticed, but by the end, I felt like I was living in a prison of his making. The breakup was messy, as these things often are with controlling partners. There were the usual tears, accusations, and promises to change, followed by anger and threats when he realized I was serious this time. He tried everything, showing up at my workplace, bombarding my friends with messages, and even calling my parents to convince them I was making a mistake. Eventually, he seemed to accept it was over and moved to another city for a job opportunity. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking I'd finally escaped his orbit of control. I changed my number, created new social media accounts, and started rebuilding my life free from his constant surveillance. For 3 years, I heard nothing from him. I even started dating again, finding someone who actually respected my independence. Then, out of nowhere, my friend Melissa sent me a message that made my blood run cold. "Is this you?" she wrote, attaching a link to an anonymous account on an adult content site. The profile had only a handful of posts but featured intimate photos of me I barely remembered taking. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the images. They were definitely me, but from years ago, back when I was with Ryan. Some were photos I'd sent him during the relationship, but others seemed to be screenshots from video calls I'd long forgotten. What made it even more disturbing was the way they were being released, slowly, methodically, with increasingly personal details about me in the captions. The most recent post included my first name and the city where I currently live. It was clear whoever was doing this was planning to reveal more identifying information with each new post. I knew immediately it was Ryan. Who else would have those photos and harbor enough resentment to use them against me years later? But suspecting him and proving it were two different things. I needed concrete evidence before I could take legal action. That's when everything spiraled into a nightmare I couldn't have imagined. I remembered that about 4 years ago, just before Ryan and I broke up, I'd upgraded my phone and sold my old one. I'd done what I thought was a factory reset, but clearly that hadn't been enough. Ryan must have somehow recovered the data from that phone. Perhaps he'd gotten to it before I sold it. Or maybe he'd purchased it himself through some convoluted scheme. Nothing would surprise me at this point. What happened next? Nobody saw it coming. The account started posting more frequently, now including hints about my workplace and even mentions of my current boyfriend. It was clear Ryan was escalating, trying to destroy the life I'd built without him. I was living in constant fear, checking the account obsessively to see what new personal information might be revealed. I went to the police, but their initial response was frustratingly inadequate. Without proof that Ryan was behind the account, they couldn't do much. One officer suggested I be more careful about taking those kinds of photos in the future, as if victim blaming was going to solve the problem at hand. That's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. I hired a digital forensics expert who specialized in cases like mine. It wasn't cheap, but it was worth every penny. He explained that IP addresses could be traced even when someone thinks they're being anonymous online. Within a week, he had the evidence I needed. The uploads had indeed come from an IP address registered to Ryan's new apartment. Additionally, the expert found metadata in some of the images that linked them directly to Ryan's devices. The methodical way he was releasing the photos, saving the most explicit ones for later when he'd already revealed identifying information about me, showed this wasn't just revenge. It was a calculated attempt to harm me professionally and personally. Armed with this evidence, I went back to the police and filed for an emergency restraining order. This time, they took me seriously. The detective assigned to my case was experienced with revenge porn cases and helped me navigate the legal process. Then came the breaking point. Ryan, apparently realizing he was about to face consequences, went into panic mode. He created multiple new accounts and began dumping all the remaining photos at once, tagging my workplace, family members, and friends. It was a desperate last attempt to hurt me before he lost the ability to do so. What he didn't realize was that this final act of vindictiveness only strengthened my case against him. Each new account, each tagged post, each piece of identifying information he included was another nail in his legal coffin. The restraining order was granted immediately, and criminal charges were filed under my state's revenge porn laws. When confronted by police, Ryan tried to deny everything, claiming his accounts must have been hacked, but the evidence was overwhelming. The IP addresses, the metadata, the pattern of escalation, all pointed directly to him. The day we appeared in court, Ryan looked nothing like the confident, manipulative person I'd known. He was pale, disheveled, and couldn't meet anyone's eyes. His lawyer had clearly advised him to take a plea deal, given the mountain of evidence against him. The judge, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, listened to my victim impact statement with complete attention. When I finished speaking about the fear and violation I'd experienced, she turned to Ryan with a look that could have frozen lava. "What you have done," she said, "is not just a violation of the law, but a profound betrayal of basic human decency. These were not just images you shared. This was a calculated campaign to terrorize someone who simply wished to live their life free from your control." The judge's face when she saw all the evidence against Ryan was absolutely priceless. You could tell she'd seen a lot in her career, but even she was appalled by the methodical nature of his revenge campaign. Sometimes karma works through the legal system in the most satisfying ways. Ryan was sentenced to 18 months probation, mandatory counseling, and a substantial fine. More importantly, he now has a criminal record that will follow him for life, something that will show up on background checks for future employment or housing. The experience changed me in ways I never expected. While recovering from the trauma, I started connecting with other survivors of revenge porn and digital abuse. I was shocked to learn how common my experience was and how few resources existed for victims. That's why I've become an advocate for digital privacy education. I now run workshops teaching people, especially women, how to properly secure their devices before selling or recycling them. A simple factory reset isn't enough. You need to use specialized software to completely wipe all data. I also work with a nonprofit that helps victims navigate the legal system and get harmful content removed from the internet. It's challenging work, but every time we help someone regain control of their digital presence, it heals a small part of my own trauma. As for Ryan, I heard through mutual acquaintances that the consequences of his actions extended far beyond legal penalties. His reputation is in tatters. He lost his job when the case made local news, and he eventually had to move back in with his parents in another state. His attempt to control and punish me ended up destroying the life he'd built for himself instead. The whole experience taught me that digital footprints never really disappear, but neither does human resilience. I refuse to be silenced or shamed, and in finding my voice, I've been able to help others find theirs too. The judge's face when she saw the evidence against Ryan was priceless. Sometimes karma works through the legal system, and watching someone face actual consequences for their actions is its own kind of satisfaction. I've known Jessica since we were in elementary school. We grew up together, survived the horrors of middle school side by side, and even though we went to different colleges, we always stayed in touch. She was the sister I never had, and I genuinely believed nothing could ever come between us. When she called me crying tears of joy after her boyfriend Mark proposed, I was ecstatic for her, and when she asked me to be her maid of honor a few weeks later over brunch, I nearly knocked over my mimosa with excitement. We spent the entire afternoon discussing her vision, a beautiful spring wedding with cherry blossoms and string lights. Jessica had always been the creative one between us, and I knew her wedding would be gorgeous. I want everything to be perfect, she told me, scrolling through Pinterest boards she'd apparently been curating for years. But we're trying to be responsible with our budget. I respected that. Mark worked in finance and Jessica had a decent job in marketing, but they were also saving for a house. Being financially responsible showed real maturity, I thought. About a month into the wedding planning process, I noticed some unusual charges on my credit card statement. At first, it was small things, $49.99 to a wedding invitation designer, $75 to a craft supply store. I assumed they were mistakes and called the credit card company to dispute them. But then bigger charges started appearing. $500 to a catering company, $300 to a bridal boutique, $200 to a popular wedding venue in our city. That's when I realized something was seriously wrong. I checked my wallet and found my credit card exactly where it should be, which made the whole situation even more confusing. Then came the breaking point, a $2,800 charge to a wedding photographer. I immediately froze my card and started investigating every transaction. Looking back through the statements, I realized all the suspicious charges had started appearing right after that brunch with Jessica. The pit in my stomach grew as I connected the dots. I pulled up my online banking app and looked more closely at the merchant names. The bridal boutique was the same one where Jessica had scheduled her dress fitting. The venue was the exact one she'd been gushing about, but claimed was slightly out of their price range. The catering company had the same unique name as the one featured on a business card she'd shown me. I felt physically sick. There had to be some explanation, right? Maybe her cards and mine got mixed up somehow. Maybe it was all just a huge coincidence. I decided to confront her directly. I invited her for coffee, trying to stay calm despite the anxiety churning in my stomach. When she arrived, all smiles and wedding magazines in hand, I could barely look at her. "Jess," I said after we'd sat down, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Have you been using my credit card for your wedding expenses?" Her face fell instantly, color draining away. She didn't even try to deny it. "I can explain," she whispered, tears already forming. "Mark lost his job 3 months ago, right before he proposed. He didn't want to tell anyone because he was embarrassed, and he thought he'd find something new quickly. But he hasn't. We've been living on my salary alone, and it's barely covering our rent. So you decided to steal from me?" I was trying to keep my voice down in the coffee shop, but I could feel my hands shaking with anger. "I was going to pay you back," she insisted. "I just needed to secure all the deposits before the good vendors got booked up. Mark has some promising interviews, and once he's working again, We'd pay you back everything before the wedding. And here's where it gets absurd. She actually pulled out a notebook with a detailed spreadsheet of everything she charged to my card. Over $7,000 in total, meticulously categorized by vendor. She'd been planning this whole thing, tracking every fraudulent charge while looking me in the eye and talking about budget constraints. "How did you even get my card information?" I asked. She looked down at her coffee. "Remember when you paid for brunch? I took a picture of your card when you went to the bathroom." The betrayal was so calculated it left me speechless. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a desperate act in a crisis. This was weeks of deliberate deception by someone I trusted completely. The absolute gall of some people. Imagine photographing your best friend's credit card and then having the audacity to ask them to be your maid of honor while secretly funding your entire wedding with their money. I told her I was canceling the card immediately and that she needed to figure out how to pay me back every cent. She broke down crying, causing a scene in the coffee shop, begging me not to report her for fraud. "Please, it would ruin everything," she sobbed. "My parents would disown me. Mark would be devastated. His family would look down on us even more than they already do." Despite my better judgment, I agreed not to go to the police if she signed a repayment agreement and started making payments immediately. I also told her I couldn't be her maid of honor anymore, or attend her wedding at all. She was upset, but seemed to understand that our friendship couldn't survive this betrayal. She made a single payment of $300 the following week and promised more was coming soon. Then weeks passed with nothing but excuses. Mark's interview process was taking longer than expected. Her car needed unexpected repairs. Her hours at work got cut. Every time I pressed her, she had another reason why she couldn't pay me back yet. That's when everything unraveled. A mutual friend tagged Jessica in some photos on social media. Pictures of her and Mark on a beach in Bali. They were on their honeymoon at a luxury resort, drinking cocktails with little umbrellas, staying in one of those overwater bungalows that cost thousands per night. The wedding had apparently happened 2 weeks earlier. She hadn't invited any of our mutual friends, claiming they were keeping it very small due to budget constraints. But now she was flaunting her lavish honeymoon for everyone to see, while I was still dealing with the credit card company and the debt she'd piled on me. This is the point where I stopped caring about our history. I compiled all the evidence, the signed repayment agreement, screenshots of the charges matching her wedding vendors, her text messages admitting to the theft, and now the honeymoon photos proving she had money for luxury expenses, but not to repay me. I took everything to the police and filed formal fraud charges. I also did something I probably shouldn't admit to, but honestly, I don't regret it. I found Mark's parents on Facebook and sent them a polite but detailed message explaining exactly what their daughter-in-law had done, including the police report number and evidence. From what I'd gathered over the years, they were very proper, wealthy people who were already skeptical of Jessica. This confirmed their worst suspicions. What happened next? Nobody saw it coming. The legal process moved surprisingly quickly once I had filed the police report. Jessica was charged with credit card fraud and theft. Because the amount exceeded $5,000, it was a felony in our state. When confronted with the evidence, she accepted a plea deal rather than risk a trial. The court ordered full restitution of the stolen funds plus interest, 200 hours of community service, and 2 years of probation. Her tearful explanation to the judge about being overwhelmed by wedding pressure didn't seem to move anyone. As for her marriage, it imploded spectacularly. Mark's family, appalled by the scandal, essentially forced him to annul the marriage by threatening to cut him off financially. Apparently, he still hadn't found a job, and they had been supporting the couple despite Jessica's claims of independence. Mark, showing his true colors, chose his family's money over standing by his new wife. Jessica ended up moving back in with her parents, working 2 jobs to pay back the restitution. She tried reaching out to me once, sending a long email about how hitting rock bottom had made her realize the person she'd become, but I never responded. Some betrayals cut too deep for second chances. I did eventually get all my money back, though it took nearly a year. The whole experience changed how I approach friendships now. I'm more cautious, more observant of red flags, and definitely more careful with my credit card when I go to the bathroom. You think friends can't betray you? Wait until you hear what this roommate did while her roommate was at work. I started noticing something off about my bedroom a few months into living with Kate. We'd moved in together after meeting through a mutual friend. She seemed normal enough, worked from home as a freelance graphic designer, paid her rent on time, and kept the common areas reasonably clean. I had a standard office job, leaving at 8 a.m. and usually getting home around 6 p.m. At first, the changes were so subtle I thought I was imagining things. My throw pillows would be arranged slightly differently than how I left them. A book on my nightstand would be at a different angle. My desk chair would be pulled out when I distinctly remembered tucking it in. I figured maybe Kate had borrowed something from my room. Not ideal, but not worth confronting her over. But then I started noticing other things. My favorite body lotion was emptying faster than usual. The corners of my fitted sheet would sometimes be loose, as if the mattress had been disturbed. Once, I even found a long blonde hair on my pillow that definitely wasn't mine or Kate's, as we both had dark hair. When I casually mentioned these things to Kate, she'd just shrug and suggest I was being forgetful, or that maybe I'd sleepwalked. "You've been working so much lately," she'd say with what I now recognize as fake concern. "Stress can do weird things to your memory." I started to think I was losing my mind, even wondering if I had some kind of dissociative disorder. I began taking photos of my room before leaving for work, just to confirm I wasn't imagining things. Sure enough, comparing the before and after pictures showed subtle but definite changes. That's when I decided to set up a hidden camera. Nothing fancy, just my old laptop positioned on my bookshelf with the camera running. I told Kate I'd be working late that day, so I wouldn't be home until around 8 p.m. When I got home that night, the usual signs were there. The subtle disarray that someone had tried to cover up. I waited until Kate went to bed, then checked the footage. What I saw made my blood boil. Around 10 a.m., shortly after I'd left for work, Kate entered my room and started preparing it. She changed my sheets to a different set, still mine just from my linen drawer, arranged some candles I kept on my dresser, and even put a small vase of flowers on my nightstand. An hour later, she let a couple into the apartment, complete strangers to me. She showed them to my room with a flourish like she was a hotel concierge. "You have until 4 p.m., I heard her say. Checkout is prompt because the room needs to be reset before the actual tenant returns from work." The couple handed her cash, I couldn't tell exactly how much, and then Kate left them alone in my bedroom. In my personal space, on my bed. I fast-forwarded through several hours, thankfully sparing myself the details of what they did in there, and around 3:45 p.m., Kate knocked on the door and announced that their time was almost up. After they left, she quickly stripped the bed, remade it with my original sheets, and attempted to put everything back exactly as it had been. I was stunned. My roommate was running some kind of hourly love hotel out of my bedroom while I was at work, using my personal space, my bed, my belongings, all without my knowledge or consent. The next day's footage revealed the same routine but with a different couple, and based on how efficiently she moved through the turnover process, it was clear this had been going on for quite some time. The level of violation here is just, renting out someone else's bedroom while they're at work? That's crossing about 17 different boundaries at once. I was furious but decided to be strategic. Instead of confronting Kate immediately, I continued recording for a full week, documenting multiple customers and clear evidence of money changing hands. I also went through our text history and found messages where she had checked when I'd be home or encouraged me to stay late at work on certain days. Then came the breaking point. I noticed some of my more personal items had been disturbed. My underwear drawer was slightly open, and some of my more expensive skincare products had clearly been used. The footage confirmed my suspicions. The guests were making themselves quite at home in my space, going through my closet, trying on my clothes for fun, and using my personal products. Once I had enough evidence, I contacted our landlord and explained the situation. He was as horrified as I was, especially since our lease explicitly prohibited subletting of any kind. We agreed to meet at the apartment the next day, when Kate's afternoon special would be in full swing. The landlord, a middle-aged man named Jim, who I'd always found reasonable, rang the doorbell at exactly 2 p.m. I told him when to arrive based on the pattern I'd observed. Kate opened the door, visibly flustered at the unexpected visit. "Routine inspection," Jim said cheerfully. "Just need to check the smoke detectors and a few other things. Won't take long." Kate tried to block him from going toward my room, saying I wasn't home and she couldn't let him into my private space. That's when I stepped out from behind Jim. "Oh, I'm here." I said with the calmest smile I could manage, and I'd actually love for Jim to see my room right now. The color drained from Kate's face. She knew she was caught. When Jim opened my bedroom door to find a startled couple scrambling to cover themselves with my sheets, I almost felt bad for everyone involved. Except Kate, of course. What happened next unfolded like a scene from a particularly satisfying revenge movie. Jim ordered the embarrassed couple to get dressed and leave immediately. Once they were gone, we confronted Kate with the video evidence I'd collected. "How long has this been going on?" Jim demanded. "Just a few times," Kate mumbled, not meeting our eyes. "The footage says otherwise," I replied, pulling up my calendar where I'd marked the dates. "Based on what I've documented and the patterns I've observed, I estimate this has been happening at least 3 times a week for several months. At $200 per booking, according to what I overheard, that's about $12,400 a month you've been making using my bedroom." She tried to defend herself with the most ridiculous explanation. "I didn't think it was a big deal. You weren't using your room during the day anyway, and I always cleaned up after. It was just maximizing our apartment's utility." Maximizing our apartment's utility? As if my bedroom was just an underused asset that needed to be monetized. The mental gymnastics some people will perform to justify their actions is truly Olympic level. Jim was furious. Not only had Kate violated about a dozen clauses in our lease, but she'd also potentially exposed him to liability issues. He informed her on the spot that she was being evicted, effective immediately, and that he would be keeping her security deposit to cover the cost of professional cleaning for my room. "You have 48 hours to remove your belongings," he said. "After that, anything left behind will be considered abandoned property." Kate burst into tears, claiming she needed the money because she wasn't getting enough freelance work. She begged for another chance, promising to stop the side business immediately. But both Jim and I had seen enough. While Kate frantically called friends looking for a place to crash, Jim helped me document everything for potential legal action. He took photos, made copies of my video evidence, and wrote up a formal statement about what he had witnessed. "I've been a landlord for 15 years, he told me later, "and I've seen some crazy stuff, but this is a first even for me." With Jim's help, I pursued legal action against Kate for unauthorized use of my personal space and belongings, violation of privacy, and potential damages. The case never went to court because Kate agreed to a settlement once her lawyer saw the overwhelming evidence against her. The settlement wasn't life-changing money, but it was enough to cover moving costs and the security deposit on a new studio apartment, one without roommates. Jim not only gave me a glowing reference, but also apparently spread the word to other landlords and rental agencies about Kate's entrepreneurial venture. I heard through mutual friends that she's been effectively blacklisted from most legitimate rental companies in the city and has had to move to a suburb with her parents. Her afternoon delight business model apparently doesn't work so well when you have to live with your mum and dad. As for me, I now live alone in a small but comfortable studio that nobody enters without my permission. And yes, I still sometimes check to make sure things are exactly where I left them. Some habits die hard. Think that's bad? You won't believe what this woman discovered about her fiancé's secret meetings. I always thought Matt and I had the perfect love story. We met during my cousin's wedding 3 years ago, where he was the best man and I was a bridesmaid. It was one of those meet-cutes straight out of a romantic comedy. He caught me when I literally tripped walking down the aisle during rehearsal. By the end of the reception, we'd exchanged numbers, and within 6 months we were living together. Fast forward 2 more years, and he proposed during a sunset beach walk on our vacation to Hawaii. The ring was especially meaningful. It had belonged to my grandmother, who had passed it to my mother, who gave it to me when Matt asked for her blessing. 3 generations of love in one beautiful vintage setting. I was over the moon. We dove into wedding planning almost immediately. I'd always dreamed of a spring ceremony with cherry blossoms and string lights, and Matt seemed just as excited as I was. We booked an absolutely gorgeous historic mansion with sprawling gardens for our venue, put down a hefty non-refundable deposit, and started arranging all the details with our wedding planner, Elise. About 6 months before the big day, I started noticing subtle changes in Matt's behavior. He became strangely protective of his phone, always keeping it face down, taking calls in another room, and changing his password from my birthday to something I didn't know. When I asked about it, he claimed it was work-related, saying his company was going through a sensitive merger, and he needed to be extra cautious about security. I tried not to be the suspicious, insecure fiancé. Matt had never given me any real reason not to trust him before this, but something felt off, and that little voice in the back of my mind wouldn't be silenced. Then came the email that changed everything. I was at work when I got a notification from Elise, our wedding planner. The subject line read Re-Venue Tour Adjustment, May 15th. I opened it, confused because we'd already had our final venue tour months ago. Matt, I've confirmed the venue tour change from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. this Thursday as requested. The venue coordinator is aware that you will be bringing Laura instead of Emily this time. Please let me know if you need anything else adjusted for this visit. I read the email 3 times, trying to make sense of it. Who was Laura? And why was Elise referring to me as Emily, as if I was just some random person who could be swapped out? I checked the email thread and realized Elise had accidentally copied me on a reply that was meant only for Matt. My stomach dropped. There was only one Laura in Matt's life that I knew of, his ex-girlfriend who had supposedly moved to London for graduate school 2 years before we met. He had mentioned her occasionally, always in that casual, ancient history way people talk about exes they're completely over. I called my boss and told her I needed to take a personal day tomorrow. She must have heard something in my voice because she didn't even ask why, just told me to take care of myself. The next day, Thursday, I dressed carefully in a professional outfit I'd never worn around Matt. I put on sunglasses and a hat as a minimal disguise and drove to our wedding venue, arriving about 20 minutes before the scheduled 3 p.m. tour. I parked where my car wouldn't be immediately visible from the main entrance and waited, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. At 2:50 p.m., Matt's car pulled up. He got out, looking annoyingly handsome, in the blue button-down shirt I'd given him for Christmas. But it wasn't his appearance that made my world stop. It was watching him walk around to the passenger side, opening the door with a flourish, and taking the hand of a tall, elegant blonde woman. The way they moved together, the casual intimacy of his hand on the small of her back, told me everything I needed to know, even before I saw him lean down to kiss her. This wasn't a business meeting. This wasn't innocent. This was my fiancé with another woman, at our wedding venue, 6 months before what was supposed to be our wedding day. I sat frozen in my car, watching them meet Elise at the entrance. They were laughing about something, the 3 of them looking for all the world like a happy couple planning their special day with their wedding planner, my wedding planner, for my wedding. The absolute gall of this man to bring his ex-girlfriend to our wedding venue, using our wedding planner that we were paying for, to plan what appeared to be their event. The betrayal was so elaborate it almost deserved a slow clap. I waited until they had gone inside before I followed. The venue was large enough that I could slip in without being immediately spotted. I heard their voices coming from the main ballroom, the same room where I had imagined our first dance would be. I think the layout works better this way, I heard Matt saying, with the head table here instead. And we can still use the garden for the ceremony? Laura's voice asked. That's the part I'm most excited about. Absolutely, Elise confirmed. The cherry blossoms should be perfect in May. My cherry blossoms, my garden ceremony, my May wedding. This is where patience finally snapped. I walked into the ballroom, removed my sunglasses, and said as calmly as I could, "Funny, that's exactly what I thought too, when I chose this venue for our wedding." The look on their faces was almost worth the heartbreak. Almost. Matt went pale, then red, then pale again. Laura's mouth dropped open in genuine shock, and Elise looked like she wanted to melt into the floor. "Emily," Matt stammered, "I can explain. I genuinely want to hear this," I interrupted, crossing my arms. "Please, explain to me why you're planning what appears to be a wedding with your ex-girlfriend at the venue I chose for our wedding, using the wedding planner I researched and hired, apparently planning to use all the ideas I spent months perfecting." Laura turned to Matt, confusion clear on her face. "You said you'd broken up with her months ago. You said you were just waiting for the right time to move your things out." And here's where it gets absurd. Matt actually tried to play it off like he was the victim in this situation. "This isn't how I wanted you to find out," he said to me, having the audacity to look hurt. "I was going to tell you, but I was waiting for the right moment." "The right moment," I repeated. "Would that be before or after I sent out our invitations? Or maybe you were planning to wait until I was in my dress, ready to walk down the aisle. That's when everything unraveled. Between Matt's fumbling excuses and Laura's increasingly horrified questions, the truth came out in bits and pieces. Matt and Laura had never really broken up. When she moved to London for her 2-year graduate program, they had decided to take a break, but with the understanding that they would resume their relationship when she returned. In the meantime, Matt had met me and decided I would make a convenient placeholder, someone to keep him company and split the bills while he waited for Laura. When she returned to the States 3 months ago, they had resumed their relationship immediately, with me none the wiser. The kicker? Matt had been planning to break off our engagement just 3 weeks before the wedding, late enough that we wouldn't be able to get any of our deposits back, but early enough that guests wouldn't have booked non-refundable travel yet. He and Laura would then swoop in and use all the arrangements we had already paid for, with only minor adjustments to suit Laura's preferences. "You have to understand," Matt had the nerve to say. "Laura and I have history. We've been planning our future since college. What we had," he gestured between us, "it was real too in its way, but Laura is the one I'm meant to be with." The delusional rationalization on display was truly something to behold. This man genuinely believed he deserved sympathy while explaining how he'd been planning to discard me like yesterday's newspaper. Laura, to her credit, seemed genuinely horrified once she understood the full extent of Matt's deception. "You told me she knew about us," she said, backing away from him. "You said she understood it was over and was just staying in the apartment until she found a new place." I looked at her, this woman who had unknowingly been the other woman in my relationship. "How long have you two been back together?" "Since I moved back in January," she said quietly. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea." January. 3 months of overlap. 3 months of Matt coming home to me, sleeping in our bed, discussing our wedding plans, all while secretly meeting the woman he actually intended to marry. "Does anyone else know about this?" I asked, suddenly wondering how many people had been laughing behind my back. Matt looked at the floor, Laura's parents, and my brother, his brother, who was supposed to be his best man at our wedding, who had been helping me plan Matt's bachelor party. I turned to Elise, who looked like she wished she could disappear. "And how long have you known?" "Just since Monday," she said, her professional composure cracking. "Matt contacted me saying there had been a change of plans, but asked me to keep it confidential until he could tell you himself. I assumed you two had broken up. I would never have agreed to this if I'd known the truth." I believe her. Elise had always been professional and supportive throughout our planning process. She had been duped by Matt just like I had. What happened next? Nobody saw it coming. Instead of crying or screaming, which would have been completely justified, a strange calm came over me. It was like watching myself from outside my body as I simply nodded, took out my phone, and started making calls. First, I called both of our families and closest friends, putting them on a conference call to efficiently deliver the news that the wedding was off, because Matt had been planning a competing ceremony with his ex-girlfriend. I did this right there in the ballroom, on speakerphone, so Matt could hear every gasp and exclamation of disbelief. Next, I called my lawyer friend for advice on the financial aspects. The venue contract was in my name, and I had paid the deposits from my personal savings with the understanding that Matt would pay me back his share, which, surprise, surprise, had never fully materialized. Matt tried to interrupt several times, but I held up my hand for silence with such authority that he actually obeyed. When I finished my calls, I turned to him one last time. "The engagement is obviously over. The ring stays with me. It was my grandmother's before you ever touched it. You have until Sunday to remove your things from our apartment. Anything left behind goes to charity." I then turned to Laura. "I genuinely hope he's worth it." I walked out with my head high, waiting until I was in my car before I allowed myself to break down. The aftermath was both painful and surprisingly empowering. Matt's family was mortified by his behavior, with his mother personally coming to collect his things because he was too cowardly to face me again. My friends rallied around me with amazing support, from helping me pack up his belongings to staying with me so I wouldn't have to be alone. As for the venue and all those non-refundable deposits, I decided not to let them go to waste. 2 months later, on what would have been our wedding day, I hosted what my friends dubbed the Dodged a Bullet celebration, a formal party celebrating new beginnings and genuine relationships. We used the flowers, the caterer, the DJ, everything we had planned, just repurposed for a different kind of celebration. A friend of mine who works for a bridal magazine thought the concept was so empowering that she featured it in an article about turning wedding heartbreak into personal triumph. The piece went viral, leading to a small movement of similar celebrations across the country. Matt and Laura, last I heard, they broke up 3 weeks after the venue showdown. Apparently, she couldn't quite trust him after seeing how easily he could lead a double life. Imagine that. As for me, I'm dating again, cautiously but optimistically, and I still have my grandmother's ring, which I now wear on my right hand as a reminder that I deserve someone who chooses me first, not as a placeholder. Speaking of families with secrets, wait until you hear what this woman's mother did with her grandchild's college fund. I'd been saving for my son Jason's college education since the day he was born. Every birthday, Christmas, bonus from work, a portion always went into his college fund. My husband and I divorced when Jason was just 5, and even though money was tight as a single mum, I never stopped contributing to that account. It was my promise to him that no matter what, he'd have options for his future. When Jason was about 8 years old, my mother offered to manage his college fund. She had worked in banking for 30 years before retiring and insisted she could get better returns than I was seeing with my basic savings approach. I can easily double what you've saved by the time he's ready for college, she promised. With my connections and knowledge of investments, we can make sure Jason has enough for any university he chooses. It made perfect sense at the time. My mother had always been financially savvy, helping me navigate buying my first home and setting up my retirement accounts. She'd always been the responsible one in the family, while my father was more of the fun-loving dreamer. After their divorce, she'd built herself a comfortable life through smart money management and hard work. If anyone could maximize Jason's college fund, it would be her. We set up a custodial account with my mother as the manager. I continued making regular deposits, and she would send quarterly statements showing impressive growth. According to those statements, by the time Jason was 16, we had accumulated just over $40,000, enough to give him a solid start at most universities. I was incredibly proud of this achievement and excited to show Jason how all those years of saving had paid off. For his 16th birthday, I planned a special dinner where I would present him with the most recent statement and talk about college options. He was already showing interest in engineering programs, and I wanted him to know that his dreams were within reach. The day before his birthday, I called the bank to get the most current balance, so the information I gave Jason would be completely up to date. What I heard left me speechless. That account currently has a balance of 2,887.42 lus, the bank representative said. I thought there must be some mistake. Could you check again? This is a college savings account for Jason Mitchell. There should be approximately $40,000 in there. I'm looking at the account history, ma'am, she replied. The current balance is correct. There have been numerous withdrawals over the past several years. My hands started shaking as I asked her to email me the account statements for the past 5 years. The real ones, not whatever doctored versions my mother had been sending me. Within minutes, I was staring at the devastating truth. Regular withdrawals, sometimes as frequent as twice a month, had been steadily draining the account. Most were in the $500 to $2,000 range, with the payees being various medical offices and clinics I didn't recognize. I immediately called my mother, trying to keep my voice steady despite the rage and betrayal boiling inside me. Mum, I just checked Jason's college account. Can you explain why there's only $3,000 left instead of $40,000? There was a long pause on the line before she responded, her voice uncharacteristically small. I can explain everything, but not over the phone. Can we meet tomorrow? No, I said firmly. Now. I'm coming over now. The 15-minute drive to her house gave me time to cycle through every emotion: shock, betrayal, anger, grief, and finally a cold, calculated determination to make this right for my son. When she opened the door, I barely recognized her. My mother had always been attractive for her age, but the woman standing before me looked at least 15 years younger than her actual 68 years. Her skin was unnaturally tight, her lips fuller than I remembered, and there wasn't a wrinkle in sight despite her age. That's when everything clicked into place. The medical offices, the regular withdrawals, my mother's increasingly youthful appearance over the years that I'd attributed to good genes and taking care of herself. You used Jason's college fund for cosmetic procedures, I said flatly. It wasn't a question. She invited me inside, visibly nervous as she offered me tea I had no interest in drinking. As we sat in her immaculate living room, the one with the view of the lake from her vacation property she'd purchased 5 years ago, she finally confessed. It started small, she explained. Just some Botox after your father left me for that younger woman. I was feeling old and invisible. I planned to replace the money before the next statement, but then I saw how good the results were, and there was a special on fillers. And here's where it gets absurd. She actually tried to justify stealing from her grandson's future by claiming she was doing it for him. I thought if I could look younger, maybe I could find a new husband with money who could help fund Jason's education even more generously, she said, as if that made perfect sense. It was an investment in both our futures. The mental gymnastics required to frame stealing your grandson's education money as somehow beneficial to him deserves some kind of gold medal in self-delusion. She continued her story, describing how one procedure led to another. Botox led to fillers, led to a mini facelift, led to a full facelift, led to eyelid surgery, led to a neck lift, each time convincing herself she would stop and pay it all back before the money was needed. I just couldn't stop, she admitted. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw something else that needed fixing. The doctors kept suggesting additional procedures, and I kept saying yes. I truly believed I could replace it all before Jason needed it for college. With what money? I demanded. Your retirement savings? The equity in your home? Were you planning to sell this vacation house you bought while draining your grandson's future? She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I thought I had time to figure it out. She'd been sending me fake quarterly statements for years, using her knowledge from her banking career to create convincing documents, all while systematically stealing from her only grandson. That's when everything unraveled. I learned she'd spent over $37,000 on various cosmetic procedures over the years. What had started as a pick-me-up after my father left her had evolved into a full-blown addiction to plastic surgery. She admitted to researching new procedures constantly and scheduling consultations with different doctors when her regular physician suggested taking a break. People talk about addiction to substances or gambling, but rarely discuss how cosmetic procedures can become just as compulsive. My mother had essentially become addicted to the temporary boost of confidence each procedure gave her, always chasing the next fix at my son's expense. I told her I was giving her two choices. Either she could sell her vacation property immediately to repay what she'd stolen, or I would press charges for theft and fraud. I wasn't bluffing. I already had the account records showing the pattern of withdrawals, and her confession would be the nail in the coffin. You wouldn't do that, she said, shocked. I'm your mother. And Jason is my son, I replied. I'll protect his future even if it means sending you to jail. The entitlement radiating from this woman was staggering. She genuinely seemed surprised that stealing tens of thousands of dollars from her grandson might have consequences beyond a stern talking to. Things went from bad to unhinged when she tried to convince me that Jason probably wouldn't even go to college, and that the money would have been wasted on him anyway. This from the woman who had bragged about her grandson's intelligence to anyone who would listen since he was a toddler. I stood up and walked to the door. You have 1 week to list this property for sale, or I'm going to the police. Your choice. The vacation house sold within a month. The lakefront location made it desirable despite the economy. My mother transferred the full $37,000 plus interest to a new account I had set up for Jason, with me as the only authorized person on the account. Our relationship hasn't recovered, and honestly, I'm not sure it ever will. I've limited her contact with Jason, who still doesn't know the full story of what happened. I simply told him that there had been a mismanagement of his funds that had been corrected. He'll learn the whole truth when he's older and can process it. The one positive outcome is that my mother finally acknowledged she needs help. The betrayal forced her to confront her body image issues and the compulsive nature of her procedures. She's now seeing a therapist who specializes in body dysmorphia and addiction, and has promised not to undergo any more cosmetic work without her therapist's approval. I've established a new, more secure college fund with Jason as a co-signer once he turns 18. This way, he'll be aware of exactly what's in his account and will be notified of any withdrawals. It's a lesson in financial literacy I never expected to teach him this way, but it's important he understands how to protect his assets. Sometimes I look at photos of my mother from before all this started, a naturally beautiful woman with smile lines that showed a life well lived, and I mourn the person she used to be. The irony is that in trying to recapture her youth, she sacrificed something far more valuable, her integrity and our trust. You might think that's the worst family betrayal possible, but this next story about a sister's babysitting betrayal will leave you speechless. My journey to motherhood wasn't traditional, but it was filled with more love than I ever thought possible. After years of fertility struggles and 2 devastating miscarriages, my husband James and I decided to grow our family through adoption. We were blessed to adopt Lily when she was just 6 months old, and 2 years later we welcomed her biological brother, Max, who was 3 months old at the time. We've always been open with our children about their adoption story, keeping it age appropriate but honest. We have beautiful books that explain adoption in terms kids can understand, and we celebrate their family day, the day they legally became ours, with special traditions each year. Lily is now 6 and Max is 4, and they are the center of our universe. My sister Vanessa and I have always had a complicated relationship. Growing up, she was the pretty popular one, while I was more studious and introverted. Our parents never overtly favored either of us, but Vanessa always seemed to harbor some resentment toward me, especially after I got married before she did and bought a house in a nice neighborhood. When we adopted our children, Vanessa seemed genuinely happy for us. She bought them expensive gifts, volunteered to babysit occasionally, and appeared to embrace her role as their aunt. She didn't have children of her own yet, though she and her husband had been married for 3 years and had mentioned wanting to start a family. Last month, James and I had the opportunity to attend a weekend marriage retreat. We hadn't had a proper getaway since before Max was born, and our marriage counselor, yes, we believe in preventative maintenance for relationships, had strongly recommended it. Vanessa immediately offered to watch the kids for the weekend at our house, saying it would give them quality time with their aunt. We prepared the kids thoroughly, explaining we'd be gone for 2 sleeps, but would call each evening to say goodnight. They were excited for their sleepover with Auntie V, and had even helped me plan special activities and meals for the weekend. Everything seemed perfect. The retreat was wonderful, connecting with my husband without interruptions, remembering why we fell in love in the first place. We came home Sunday afternoon refreshed and eager to see our children. The kids seemed subdued when we returned, but I chalked it up to tiredness from an exciting weekend with their aunt. Vanessa reported that everything had gone smoothly, and there had been no issues whatsoever. She left shortly after we arrived, saying she had dinner plans with friends. That evening, as I was tucking Lily into bed, she asked me a question that made my blood run cold. "Mommy, why are you pretending to be my real mum?" My heart stopped. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Auntie V said you're not my actual mother. She said my real mommy didn't want me, and that's why you got me instead. I somehow maintained my composure, assuring Lily that while she grew in another woman's tummy, I was absolutely her real mother in every way that mattered. I explained that families are made in many different ways, and ours was made through adoption, which was a choice made out of love. I reminded her of the adoption books we read together and how special our family was. She seemed partially reassured, but then dropped another bombshell. Auntie V said we shouldn't tell you that she told us. She said it was our special secret and that you'd be very angry if you knew we were talking about our real parents. My 6-year-old was worried I'd be angry with her for asking about her origins, because my sister had sworn her to secrecy after deliberately traumatizing her. The calculated cruelty of it knocked the wind out of me. After Lily fell asleep, I checked on Max. Though younger, he seemed confused and asked if I was keeping him forever or if he would have to go away someday. I reassured him as best I could, but it was clear Vanessa had gotten to him too. When I told my husband what had happened, he was livid. He wanted to call Vanessa immediately, but I convinced him we needed to be strategic. First, we needed to understand exactly what she had told our children. The next morning, I called our pediatrician, who recommended a child therapist specializing in adoption issues. Over the next few days, through gentle conversations and play therapy sessions, we learned the full extent of what Vanessa had done. She hadn't just mentioned their adoption in passing, she had systematically undermined their security in our family throughout the entire weekend. She had told them their real parents couldn't take care of them because they were too poor and lived in a bad place. She said that James and I were nice people for taking in unwanted children, but that we might change our minds someday if they weren't good enough. The callous manipulation involved here is staggering. To deliberately plant seeds of insecurity in children as young as 4 and 6, to weaponize their adoption story against them, and to swear them to secrecy so the damage could fester unseen, that takes a special kind of calculated malice. I was devastated and furious, but determined to handle this in a way that would protect my children. I documented everything they reported, consulted with their therapist, and then finally confronted my sister. Not in person, where emotions might escalate, but in a carefully worded email that laid out exactly what I knew she had done and the impact it was having on my children. Her response was both revealing and revolting. Instead of apologizing, she defended herself, saying the children deserved to know the truth and that I was living in a fantasy world by pretending to be their mother. She accused me of stealing other women's babies rather than accepting God's plan for my infertility. The mask had finally slipped completely. This wasn't just a momentary lapse in judgment. This was deep-seated resentment and a fundamental disrespect for adoptive families. Then came the breaking point. In her tirade, Vanessa accidentally revealed the root of her animosity. She and her husband had applied to adopt through the same agency we had used but had been rejected after the home study phase. She blamed me for this, convinced I must have said something to the agency to sabotage her application. The reality, which I learned later when I contacted the agency out of concern, was far different. Vanessa and her husband had been found unsuitable for adoption due to financial instability. They were deeply in debt, and concerns about her husband's prior anger management issues. Their rejection had nothing to do with me, but Vanessa had created a narrative where I was the villain who stole the family that should have been hers. I forwarded her email to my parents, who had previously been reluctant to take sides in any disagreements between us. After seeing her words in black and white, they were horrified and fully supported my decision to cut contact with her. I also took legal precautions, consulting a family lawyer who helped me draft a cease and desist letter prohibiting Vanessa from contacting my children. We updated all emergency contact forms at the kids' schools and daycare, explicitly stating that my sister was not authorized to pick them up under any circumstances. We even spoke to our neighbors, asking them to alert us if they ever saw Vanessa near our home. The impact on my children required intensive repair. We increased their therapy sessions and developed age-appropriate ways to reassure them about their permanence in our family. Our amazing therapist suggested creating a family security box, a special container filled with symbols of our family bond, including court documents from their adoptions, family photos, handprints, and letters James and I wrote, expressing our unconditional love and commitment to them. We also connected with other adoptive families in our area, creating a supportive community where our children could see various family formations and know they weren't alone. This network has been invaluable, providing both the children and us with friendships based on shared experiences and understanding. The most heartbreaking part was rebuilding the trust that Vanessa had damaged. For weeks, Lily would ask me multiple times a day if I was really truly her mother forever. Max became clingy and had nightmares about being taken away. Each question and tear was a direct result of my sister's deliberate cruelty. It's been 6 months since that weekend, and we've made significant progress. Lily no longer questions her place in our family, and Max's nightmares have subsided. We continue with family therapy, but now it's more about strengthening our bonds rather than repairing damage. As for Vanessa, she made one attempt to reconcile after my parents pressured her to apologize. The apology was so full of justifications and self-pity that it only confirmed my decision to keep her out of our lives. My parents have reluctantly accepted that their daughters will not have a relationship, though they still occasionally express hope for future reconciliation. I've made it clear that some betrayals can't be undone, especially those that harm innocent children. This experience has reinforced what I already knew. Family isn't about biology, it's about love, commitment, and protection. My children are my children, not because they grew in my body, but because they grew in my heart, and I will defend that bond against anyone who tries to diminish it, even if that person shares my DNA. Family can hurt you deeply, but wait until you hear how this woman discovered the truth about her partner's coaching sessions. Trevor and I had been dating for almost 3 years, and living together for one when I started noticing something weird about our arguments. They always seemed to follow the same pattern, with him using oddly specific phrases that felt rehearsed. It was like arguing with someone who had a script. For example, whenever I brought up how he never helped with household chores, he'd respond with this precise line: "I understand you're feeling overwhelmed by your perception of the division of labor, but your standards are unusually high compared to most households. Not, you clean too much, or I do my share like a normal person might say." This weirdly formal, almost clinical response. Or if I mentioned feeling neglected because he was always on his phone, he'd say, "I recognize your need for validation is presenting as criticism of my relaxation methods." Who talks like that during a fight with their partner? At first, I thought maybe he'd been reading relationship books or seeing a therapist, which would have been great. Communication is important, right? But something felt off about it. The way he delivered these lines felt calculated rather than genuine. The real red flag was how he started predicting my responses, sometimes even mouthing what I was about to say while I was saying it. It was unsettling, like he had studied me like a specimen and could anticipate my every move. When I called him out on it once, he just smiled and said, "You're very consistent, babe." One Saturday, Trevor went to a guy's weekend with friends I'd never met. I decided to use the alone time to deep clean our apartment. While dusting behind the headboard of our bed, I found something taped to the back, a small voice recorder. My first thought was that we were being spied on by someone, and I felt violated and scared. I took the recorder to my laptop and played it back. What I heard made my blood run cold. It was us, me and Trevor, having an argument from 2 weeks earlier about him forgetting my birthday. But the recording started before I even entered the room, with Trevor saying to himself, "Test scenario 16, forgotten special occasion response pattern." I listened to more recordings and found dozens of our arguments, all preceded by Trevor, giving them titles and scenario numbers. He was deliberately starting fights to record my reactions. This was disturbing enough. But then I remembered his tablet. Trevor always kept it password protected, but I knew the code because I'd seen him enter it many times. I opened it, feeling slightly guilty about invading his privacy, but more concerned about what else I might find. In his Notes app, I found a folder titled Relationship Management. Inside were detailed transcripts of our arguments, annotated with his observations about my triggers, predictable responses, and emotional vulnerabilities. He'd categorized them by topic: money discussions, family conflicts, intimacy issues, household responsibilities. But that wasn't even the worst part. There was a document called Transition Strategy, where Trevor had outlined his plan to break up with me and seamlessly transfer to a relationship with someone named Megan. He had created actual playbooks for her, teaching her how to manage me during the breakup period when we would inevitably run into each other because, surprise, Megan lived in our apartment building. Apparently, they'd been seeing each other for 6 months. Trevor had been recording our arguments and creating these detailed guides to teach Megan exactly how to handle me, what to say when I got upset, and how to neutralize my emotional responses. He'd even transcribed specific phrases I used when hurt or angry so she could be prepared. There were notes like, "When Emily says, 'I can't believe this is happening,' respond with calm sympathy but maintain firm boundaries. Do not engage with tears. She uses them tactically. If Emily brings up the vacation we planned, redirect to how relationships evolve and people grow apart. Use the word journey. She responds well to spiritual framing." I felt physically sick reading through it. This wasn't just cheating. This was systematic psychological manipulation. Trevor hadn't just been studying my reactions for his own benefit. He'd been creating a transfer of power to another woman, teaching her all my vulnerabilities and how to exploit them. The creepy spreadsheet energy of it all was almost as disturbing as the betrayal itself. Who creates a database of their partner's emotional responses like they're some kind of psychology experiment? I kept reading and discovered that Trevor had planned to break up with me in 3 weeks after Megan had completed the training program. There was a scheduled final exam where he would role-play me and Megan would practice responding to my anticipated reactions. I also learned that Trevor's parents had been paying his portion of our rent because he told them he was saving for an engagement ring. In reality, he'd been spending that money taking Megan on trips while telling me he was at work conferences. There were even photos of them together on the tablet, looking happy at a beach resort I recognized, the one I had suggested for our next vacation. I sat there for hours, cycling through shock, hurt, rage, and a strange sense of violated fascination. It was like discovering I'd been living with a sociopath who viewed human emotions as data points to be manipulated. This goes beyond normal cheating into some seriously deranged territory. Imagine documenting your partner's emotional responses like you're Jane Goodall observing chimps in the wild. When Trevor came home Sunday evening, I was waiting with his packed bags by the door. He looked confused until I held up the recorder. "What's this, Trevor? Research material for your relationship management project?" His face went through this incredible transformation. Confusion to recognition to calculation to an attempt at looking wounded. "Emily, I can explain. It's not what you think. Really, because I think it's exactly what I found spelled out in detail on your tablet, including your plans with Megan and how you've been coaching her to handle me when you leave." He switched tactics immediately, going from defensive to what I now recognized as his rational de-escalation voice, the one I'd heard him rehearsing on the recordings. "This is actually a positive thing if you think about it. I've been conducting relationship research to understand communication patterns. It's like couples therapy, but more data-driven. The audacity of this man to spin psychological warfare as some kind of helpful research project. The mental gymnastics required to frame this as anything but deeply disturbing would qualify him for the Olympics. "Get out," I said. "I've already called a locksmith who's coming tomorrow, and I've transferred your half of this month's rent from our joint account to mine. You know, the half your parents have been paying while you supposedly save for a ring?" His face fell at the mention of his parents. "You didn't contact them, did you?" "Not yet, but I will be sending them copies of your research as well as the receipt for the engagement ring you never bought. I'm sure they'll find it educational." What happened next? Nobody saw it coming. Trevor actually tried to grab the tablet from me, claiming it was private intellectual property. In the struggle, he accidentally knocked over a vase my grandmother had given me, shattering it on the floor. That's when everything unraveled. Something in me snapped at seeing this final destruction of something I cherished. I didn't yell or cry. I just looked at him and said, "Scenario 75, partner reveals himself as complete sociopath. Predicted response, permanent removal from my life." The look on his face when I used his own clinical formatting against him was almost worth all the pain. He left that night, alternating between begging for another chance and threatening legal action for invasion of privacy. I didn't care. I changed the locks the next day, blocked him everywhere, and yes, I sent the evidence to his parents, along with a polite note thanking them for inadvertently subsidizing my housing while their son prepared to leave me. 2 weeks later, I received a message from an unknown number. It was Megan. Apparently, Trevor had moved into her apartment after our breakup, but things had quickly fallen apart when she caught him recording their conversations and creating a new set of management notes about her. "I found a document where he was comparing our arguments side by side," she wrote. "He was rating whose reactions were more manageable. I thought you should know you weren't the only one." We met for coffee and discovered we actually had a lot in common, including now the experience of having dated a manipulative creep who treated relationships like behavioral experiments. She showed me more documents she found that I hadn't seen, including Trevor's long-term plan to cycle through relationships, using what he'd learned each time to optimize the next one. The cherry on top of this bizarre Sunday, Trevor's parents cut him off financially after seeing the evidence of how he'd been using their money. According to social media updates from mutual friends, he's now living in their basement while working at a call center, ironically following actual scripts for a living. Megan and I have become good friends. She's now dating a musician who writes songs about his feelings like a normal person instead of spreadsheets about her emotional weaknesses. I'm seeing a kind, straightforward guy who leaves post-it notes with simple messages like, "thinking of you," rather than conducting psychological research on my argument patterns. As for Trevor, he tried to contact both of us several months later with a lengthy email about how he'd grown from the experience and wanted to process the relationship dissolution in a healthy way. We both responded with the same message: unsubscribe. If that betrayal made you gasp, you'll be floored by what this person discovered about their roommate's dating profile habits. It all started when my friend Connor texted me out of the blue, "Since when are you back on Tinder?" "Thought you were taking a dating break." I was confused because I definitely wasn't on Tinder. I'd deleted all my dating apps nearly 2 years ago after a string of disastrous dates left me wanting to focus on myself for a while. I laughed it off and told Connor he must have seen someone who looked like me. But then a week later, my coworker Jenna mentioned seeing my profile on Bumble. A few days after that, my cousin said she spotted me on Hinge. This was getting weird. Are you sure it's me? I asked each time. They all confirmed it was definitely my photos, the same ones from my Instagram. One was the picture from my trip to Sedona last year, another from my brother's wedding, and even one of me with my dog at the park. I started to get concerned about identity theft. Someone was clearly using my photos to catfish people, and I needed to figure out who and why. I asked my friends to screenshot the profiles they'd seen, and that's when things got really strange. The profiles had my photos, but not my name. They listed the user as Megan, which happens to be my roommate's name. The bio described someone with Megan's job and age, but with my hobbies, travel experiences, and even mentioned my dog Bentley by name as if he was hers. It was this bizarre hybrid identity, my face and lifestyle, but with Megan's basic details. I've lived with Megan for about a year. We weren't close friends before becoming roommates, but we had mutual acquaintances who vouched for her when I was looking for someone to share my apartment. She was quiet, paid rent on time, and mostly kept to herself, often saying she was too busy with work to socialize much. I respected her privacy, and she respected mine, or so I thought. Looking back, there were signs I should have noticed. Megan always seemed unusually interested in my social life, asking detailed questions about my trips and events. She'd compliment my photos effusively and ask about where I got my clothes or had my hair done. I just thought she was being friendly or making conversation. When I scrolled through the screenshots my friends sent, I noticed something even more disturbing. In some of the photos that were originally just of me, Megan had photoshopped herself into them. There was one from my vacation in Puerto Rico, where she had inserted herself next to me on the beach, and another from a concert where she had edited herself into our group picture. The editing was actually pretty good. If you didn't know the original photos, you might think they were genuine. I felt violated and confused. Why would my seemingly normal roommate steal my photos and parts of my identity for dating apps? Was she dangerous? Should I be worried about my safety? Instead of confronting her immediately, I decided to gather more information. I created a dummy Tinder account with a random guy's photos, with permission from a friend's brother who lived in another state, and swiped until I found Megan's profile. I matched with her and started a conversation to see what else she might be claiming. What happened next, nobody saw coming. Megan began telling my friend's brother about her amazing solo trip to Japan last year, which was actually my trip. She described my experiences visiting temples in Kyoto, getting lost in Tokyo, and even shared the story about how I had accidentally ordered the poisonous part of a fugu fish and panicked. It was fine. The chef caught the mistake before serving it. She was literally living my life in these chats, down to the smallest details. She mentioned her dog Bentley's habit of stealing socks, her younger brother's destination wedding in Mexico, and even her childhood scar from falling off a swing set. All things from my life that I had either posted about or mentioned in conversations at home. The dating deception went from strange to seriously disturbing. It's one thing to use someone's photos, but to completely co-opt their life experiences, that's next-level identity theft with a side of concerning obsession. When I had collected enough evidence, I decided to confront her. I waited until we were both home one evening and casually asked, "Hey Megan, weird question, but have you been using my photos on dating apps?" Her reaction was telling. Instead of confusion or denial, her face immediately flushed red. She stammered for a moment before composing herself and saying, "I can explain. It's not what you think." "I'm really interested to hear what explanation could possibly make this okay," I said, showing her the screenshots from my friends. And here's where it gets absurd. Megan claimed her therapist had suggested this identity borrowing as a way to manage her social anxiety around dating. According to her, she was too insecure to use her own photos or talk about her own boring life. But her therapist supposedly suggested she could practice dating conversations using a borrowed identity to build confidence. Once I feel comfortable talking to guys, I was going to transition to showing the real me, she explained, as if that made it all perfectly reasonable. I'm not a mental health professional, but I'm pretty sure no legitimate therapist would suggest identity theft as a treatment for social anxiety. This explanation was so absurd it almost made me laugh, despite how angry I was. So, your therapist told you to steal my photos, Photoshop yourself into my vacation pictures, and tell strangers detailed stories from my personal life? I asked skeptically. Well, not exactly like that, she mumbled. It was more of an inspiration to create a practice persona while I build confidence. The mental gymnastics required to justify this behavior would qualify for the Olympics. I couldn't believe she was trying to medicalize what was clearly just catfishing. I told her I wanted all the profiles deleted immediately, and I watched as she removed them from each app. I also contacted the dating platforms directly with evidence of the identity theft, ensuring the profiles couldn't be reactivated. I made it clear to Megan that this was a serious violation of my privacy and trust, and that I was considering legal action. Then came the breaking point. While scrolling through her phone to delete the profiles, I noticed a calendar event titled Dinner with Jake, Toscano's 8 p.m., scheduled for the following evening. Jake was one of the guys she'd been chatting with using my photos. The conversation had progressed enough that they had planned an in-person date. Are you seriously planning to meet one of these guys in person? I asked incredulously. What was your plan exactly? Show up looking completely different from the photos and hope he doesn't notice? Megan looked down at her hands. I was going to tell him I recently dyed my hair and gained some weight. Most guys are too polite to say anything. I was speechless. The level of delusion and disregard for others was staggering. Not only was she violating my privacy, but she was also setting up these unsuspecting men for an uncomfortable situation at best and a dangerous one at worst. This catfishing scheme was so poorly thought out, it's almost impressive. Did she think these guys wouldn't notice they were on a date with someone who looked nothing like the person in the photos? Or that they wouldn't be upset about being deceived? At that point, I decided Megan needed to experience the consequences of her actions. Several of our mutual friends were going to be at Toscano's the next night for a birthday dinner, including friends who knew what my roommate had been doing. I texted them the update and suggested they might want to say hello to Megan and Jake during their dinner. The next evening, Megan dressed up nervously for her date. She asked to borrow my necklace, the same one visible in some of the photos she'd used, which I obviously refused. She left looking anxious but excited. About 2 hours later, she came home in tears. Our friends had coincidentally stopped by her table to say hello, and in the process revealed everything to Jake. They showed him the real photos on my Instagram account and explained that Megan had been using my identity on dating apps. Jake, understandably, was upset and left immediately. Our friends didn't even need to be malicious about it. The simple truth was damaging enough. Megan was humiliated and furious with me for setting her up. I reminded her that she was the one who had stolen my identity and lied to everyone involved. The next morning, she announced she was moving out. She was gone within a week, leaving the apartment in surprising good condition, but with 3 months of rent still owed on our lease. After she left, I received messages from 2 women who had previously lived with Megan. They had found me through our mutual connections and wanted to warn me that she had done similar things to them, using their photos and life details on social media and dating sites. Apparently, this was a pattern for her, not a one-time lapse in judgment. I've since become much more careful with my online presence. I watermark all my social media photos with a subtle mark that's difficult to edit out. I've adjusted my privacy settings and am more selective about what I share online. I've even helped a few other people identify and address similar cases of identity theft after sharing my experience. As for Megan, I occasionally see updates about her through mutual acquaintances. She moved to another city and, from what I hear, is actually using her own photos on dating apps now. I hope for everyone's sake that she's found a healthier way to manage her insecurities than by stealing someone else's life. Think workplace boundaries can protect you from betrayal? This next story about a boss's secret Instagram surveillance will make you check your privacy settings. I've been working at my company for over 3 years now. It's a mid-sized marketing firm with about 150 employees across 3 offices. Overall, I enjoyed my job and the people I worked with, until everything went sideways with my boss, Diane. Diane became our department head about a year ago, when our previous manager retired. From the beginning, she had this intense micromanagement style that made everyone uncomfortable. She wanted to know where we were at all times, required detailed logs of our activities, and would randomly check in to make sure we were at our desks. It felt excessive, but I chalked it up to new manager anxiety and figured she'd relax once she settled into the role. I'm pretty active on social media, especially Instagram. I keep my account private and am selective about who I allow to follow me. It's mostly friends, family, and a few trusted coworkers. Definitely not Diane or any upper management. I use it as a personal space to share my life outside of work, posting about concerts, trips, my pets, that sort of thing. One Monday morning during our team meeting, Diane made a comment that struck me as odd. We were discussing our weekends, and I mentioned I had done some gardening and caught up on Netflix. Diane smirked and said, "That's all? What about the Coldplay concert on Saturday? Chris Martin was on fire, wasn't he?" I felt a chill run down my spine. I hadn't mentioned the concert to anyone at work. The only place I'd posted about it was in my Instagram stories, which disappear after 24 hours. How did Diane know I was there, let alone specific details about Chris Martin's performance? When I asked her about it, she brushed it off with a casual, "Oh, I think Melissa mentioned it." Melissa was a coworker who did follow my Instagram, so it seemed plausible, but something felt off. When I asked Melissa later, she confirmed she hadn't told Diane anything about my weekend. That's when I started paying attention to other comments Diane had made over the past few months. She had mentioned my sister's new baby by name before I had told her about it. She had asked how my friend's wedding in Cabo was, though I'd never discussed those travel plans at work. She even made a joke about my cat knocking over a Christmas tree, something I'd posted a video of on my private Instagram. The pieces were starting to fit together, and I didn't like the picture they formed. Somehow, Diane had access to my private Instagram content. I decided to set a trap. I posted a fake Instagram story about considering a job offer from a competitor, visible only to my followers. I made it look authentic, but didn't mention it to anyone at work. The next day, Diane called me into her office looking concerned. "I'm hearing rumors that you might be looking to leave us," she said, trying to sound casual. "Is everything okay with your position here?" Gotcha. There was no way she could have known about that post unless she was viewing my Instagram. But how? I hadn't accepted any follow requests from accounts I didn't recognize. I went to our IT department with my concerns. Tom, our head of IT security, was disturbed by what I told him and offered to help investigate. He suggested I check my followers list carefully for any accounts that seemed suspicious. Scrolling through my followers, I found one that caught my attention. Sarah Tutt Johnston, 88. The profile picture showed a woman I didn't recognize, and the bio claimed she was a former classmate from my university. The account had been following me for about 10 months, right around when Diane started as our department head. The profile had no posts and was following only about 20 people. I showed this to Tom, who agreed it looked suspicious. He suggested a more technical approach to confirm our suspicions. With permission from HR, who were now involved due to the potential privacy violation, Tom was able to check the company's network logs for access to Instagram from company devices. What he found was damning. Diane had been regularly accessing Instagram from her work computer and phone, despite claiming in meetings that she didn't do social media. More importantly, Tom was able to determine that the suspicious account had accessed Instagram numerous times from Diane's company-issued laptop. But that wasn't even the worst part. Tom discovered that Diane had been using screen recording software to capture my stories before they disappeared, and had been taking screenshots of my posts. She had a folder on her company laptop labeled HR documentation, with a subfolder with my name on it. Inside were dozens of screenshots of my personal Instagram posts and stories, organized by date, with notes attached to many of them. One screenshot showed me at a winery with friends, with Diane's note, "Drinking while knowing she had a presentation the next day. Unprofessional." Another showed me at the beach when I'd called in sick 2 months earlier. Her note read, "Evidence of sick day abuse." What she didn't know was that I had taken that beach trip after an outpatient medical procedure. My doctor had actually recommended light walking near water as part of my recovery, and I had proper medical documentation for the sick day. The folder contained dozens of similar infractions that Diane had been documenting, all from my personal, private social media that she had gained access to through deception. She had been building a case against me using my personal life as ammunition. The violation felt immense and disturbing. To create a fake identity, pose as someone from my past, infiltrate my personal space, and then weaponize my private life against me professionally, that goes beyond regular workplace conflict into something genuinely sinister. It's the digital equivalent of breaking into someone's home and going through their diary. I was furious but also determined to handle this correctly. With Tom and HR's help, I compiled all the evidence. Network logs showing Diane accessing the fake account from company devices, the screenshots and notes she had been collecting, and documentation of her comments revealing knowledge she could only have gotten from my private social media. We took everything to the corporate office. The regional director was appalled, especially when I revealed that the beach sick day had been doctor-recommended recovery time after a medical procedure, information that was protected under medical privacy laws. Then came the breaking point. During the investigation, HR discovered that Diane had been doing this to at least 3 other employees, all people who had received positive performance reviews and who might have been seen as threats to her position. She had created different fake personas for each of us, carefully crafted to appear as people from our past who we might accept as followers. One of my colleagues had posted about struggles with fertility treatments, deeply personal information that Diane had documented and flagged as potential reliability issues due to medical distraction. Another had posted about a relative with addiction issues, which Diane had noted as family instability that could affect work performance. The corporate response was swift. Diane was terminated immediately for multiple violations of company policy, ethical standards, and potentially several privacy laws. The company's legal team got involved to assess the full scope of liability her actions had created. All affected employees were notified and given access to the information that had been collected on them. The company also offered to pay for identity monitoring services for each of us, though that felt somewhat beside the point, given the nature of the violation. In the aftermath, the company implemented new social media policies and training for all managers. They didn't restrict our personal use of social media, but instead focused on establishing clear boundaries between our professional and personal lives. Managers received specific training on privacy ethics and the legal implications of surveilling employees' personal activities. As for me, I've become almost obsessively careful about who I allow to follow me online. I thoroughly vet any follow requests, especially from people claiming to be from my past. I've adjusted all my privacy settings to their highest levels and regularly audit who has access to my content. The most unsettling part was discovering that Sarah Johnston, 88, had interacted with me occasionally, commenting on posts or responding to stories with supportive messages. Looking back at those interactions, knowing it was actually my boss pretending to be someone else sends chills down my spine. I stayed with the company, and they've done their best to make things right. My new department head is transparent and respectful of boundaries. Still, there's a lingering sense of violation that's hard to shake. When you discover someone has been secretly watching and documenting your personal life for months, it fundamentally changes how safe you feel sharing anything online. Several of us who were affected have since connected and formed a support network of sorts. We've even consulted with privacy advocates about strengthening social media security and identifying fake accounts. It's become something of a mission for me to help others protect themselves from this kind of invasion. It's been about 8 months since everything came to light. I've heard through the grapevine that Diane has had trouble finding new employment in our industry. Apparently, creating elaborate fake identities to spy on your employees doesn't look great on a resume. Who would have thought? Just when you think relationship deception couldn't get worse, wait until you hear what this wife discovered about her husband's workplace lies. I met Alex when we were both in our mid-20s. He was charming, attentive, and seemed like everything I'd been looking for in a partner. After dating for 2 years, we got married in a small ceremony with just our closest friends and family. Alex had recently started a job at a prestigious marketing firm, and I was working as a high school English teacher. We seemed like the perfect match. From the beginning of our marriage, Alex was adamant about keeping his work life separate from his personal life. He'd come home and complain about the pressure and office politics, saying he wanted our home to be a sanctuary from all that. I understood completely. Who doesn't want to leave work stress at the office? When I suggested hosting a dinner for his colleagues, he'd say they weren't the kind of people we'd want in our home. When his company had events or parties, he'd claim they were boring corporate functions where spouses would feel uncomfortable, or that they were just for employees. Over time, I stopped asking. This went on for nearly 4 years. 4 years of never meeting a single one of his co-workers, never being invited to a holiday party, company picnic, or even casual happy hours. Looking back, I can't believe I didn't see the red flags sooner. But Alex had a way of making his boundaries seem reasonable. He was an excellent manipulator. The truth finally came out last December. Alex's company was having their annual holiday party at a hotel downtown. As usual, he told me it was employees only and left dressed in his best suit. That same evening, I was meeting my friend Jenna for dinner at a restaurant in that same hotel. After dinner, Jenna suggested we grab a drink at the hotel bar. As we approached the bar, I noticed it was sectioned off for a private event, Alex's company holiday party. Through the glass doors, I could see a crowd of people mingling, laughing, and clearly having a good time. And there was Alex, in the center of a group, his arm around a woman I didn't recognize. I watched for a few minutes, confused and hurt. There were clearly other spouses there, people in festive attire who were obviously not dressed for a day at the office. After 4 years of being told these events were strictly for employees, seeing the truth with my own eyes was jarring. "I think that's my husband's company party," I told Jenna, "the one I'm supposedly not invited to." Jenna, being the supportive friend she is, encouraged me to go in. "You're his wife. You have every right to be there." With my heart pounding, I walked up to the doors. The hostess smiled at me. "Are you with the Palmer Marketing Group?" "Yes, I'm Alex Wilson's wife," I replied. Her eyes widened slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, of course. Please come in." The moment I walked in, I could feel eyes turning toward me. Alex was across the room and hadn't noticed me yet. I made my way through the crowd, smiling politely as people gave me curious glances. When I reached Alex, he was mid-conversation with the woman I'd seen earlier, and an older man who appeared to be a senior colleague. The look on Alex's face when he saw me is something I'll never forget. Pure panic. "Emily," he said, his voice unnaturally high. What are you doing here?" "I was having dinner downstairs and thought I'd surprise you," I said, trying to keep my voice light despite the tension. "I hope that's okay." Before Alex could respond, the older man extended his hand to me. "You must be Alex's sister. It's wonderful to finally meet you. Alex has told us so much about you." I froze, confused. "I'm sorry, what? I'm not his sister. I'm his wife." The silence that followed was deafening. The older man looked at Alex, then back at me, clearly confused. "But Alex has told us all about caring for his sister who lives with him. He's never mentioned being married." This is where the record scratched. Sister. Living with him. What twisted alternate reality had I just stepped into? The woman beside Alex jumped in, clearly trying to salvage the increasingly awkward situation. "There must be some confusion. Alex has told us about his sister Emily, who has health issues. He takes care of her, which is why he always leaves precisely at 5. "Health issues," I repeated, looking directly at Alex, whose face had gone completely white. At this point, a clearly intoxicated colleague approached our group, slapping Alex on the back. "Wilson, is this the famous sister? Man, you're a saint for taking care of her all these years. My cousin has schizophrenia too. It's so tough on the family." I felt like I'd been dropped into some bizarre psychological thriller. "I'm not schizophrenic," I said slowly. "I'm his wife of 4 years. We've been together for 6. The colleague's face fell, and he looked at Alex with growing horror. "Oh shit, man. I'm gonna go get another drink." He backed away quickly, leaving Alex to face the mess he'd created. What kind of deranged individual creates an elaborate fiction about their spouse being their mentally ill sister? The sheer effort required to maintain this lie for years is almost impressive, if it weren't so deeply disturbing. That night unraveled in a blur of shocked faces and awkward apologies from Alex's colleagues. I learned that for 4 years, my husband had told everyone at his company that he was a single man caring for his schizophrenic sister named Emily. This explained why he never invited colleagues over. His sister was unpredictable and couldn't handle visitors. Why he always left work at exactly 5 p.m. to administer medication, and why he couldn't travel for business. He couldn't leave his sister alone. But that wasn't even the worst part. As the truth came tumbling out that night, several female colleagues approached me separately, visibly upset. It turned out Alex had been having affairs with at least 3 women from his office over the past few years. These women had believed he was single but constrained by family obligation, a narrative that apparently made him seem noble and self-sacrificing. He told me his sister, had good days and bad days, one woman explained tearfully. He said he was waiting until you were stable enough to be placed in assisted living before he could fully commit to a relationship. Another woman revealed he'd been seeing her for nearly 2 years, even giving her a key to his apartment, which turned out to be a separate rental he kept for these encounters. He'd told her they couldn't go to his real home because of his sister's condition. That night, I took a hotel room and didn't go home. The next morning, I called a locksmith to change our locks and contacted a divorce attorney. Then I did something Alex probably never anticipated. I emailed his company's HR department. In my email, I included photos of our marriage certificate, joint tax returns, and our wedding photos. I explained the elaborate fiction Alex had created and how he had used this fake narrative to pursue inappropriate relationships with coworkers, some of whom were his subordinates. I wasn't trying to save my marriage. That was beyond repair, but I wanted the truth to be known. Things went from bad to unhinged when Alex realized what I'd done. He showed up at our house, unable to get in due to the changed locks, and alternated between begging for forgiveness and accusing me of trying to ruin his life. He claimed it had all started as a small lie that snowballed, and that he'd felt trapped by his own deception. "I never meant to hurt you," he insisted through the door. "It just became easier to keep everyone separate." The mental gymnastics required to frame years of calculated deception as something that just happened accidentally is truly Olympic-level self-delusion. This man didn't tell a small fib that got out of hand. He constructed an entire alternative reality and maintained it meticulously for years. The company took my evidence seriously. After an internal investigation confirmed everything, Alex was terminated for creating a hostile work environment and violating multiple company policies about workplace relationships. Several of his colleagues, including the women he'd been involved with, reached out to me with messages of support and their own stories of how Alex had manipulated them. Our divorce was finalized 6 months later. I kept our house and received a settlement that reflected the emotional damage his deception had caused. In a strange twist, Alex's elaborate lie about me being mentally ill actually worked in my favor during the proceedings, as it demonstrated the extent of his deception and emotional abuse. The experience changed me profoundly. After taking some time to heal, I decided to return to school. I'm now working on a master's degree in psychology, with a focus on pathological lying and personality disorders. There's some irony there, I know, but I've found purpose in understanding the behavior that nearly destroyed my life. I've also found support in unexpected places. Some of Alex's former colleagues have become friends, and we've helped each other process the manipulation we experienced. One of the women he was seeing has become a close friend. We bonded over being victims of the same elaborate con. As for Alex, I heard he moved to another state and started over with a new job. Sometimes I wonder what story he's telling his new colleagues about his past. I can only hope that the consequences of his actions taught him something, but people capable of maintaining such elaborate deceptions rarely change. The strangest part of all this? For years, I taught my high school students about unreliable narrators in literature, never suspecting I was married to one in real life. Think that's the ultimate betrayal? You haven't heard about this woman who discovered her wife's financial deception. My wife Beth and I had been married for 8 years, and while we weren't wealthy by any means, we both had stable jobs with decent salaries. I worked in IT for a healthcare company, and she was a project manager at a construction firm. Our combined income should have allowed us to live comfortably, save for retirement, and even take the occasional vacation. But somehow, we always seemed to be just scraping by. Our joint checking account would get dangerously low before each payday, and whenever I suggested we should have more cushion, Beth would show me spreadsheets detailing our expenses and explain how inflation and the cost of living were eating away at our earnings. "The numbers don't lie," she'd say, showing me her meticulously organized budget. "After the mortgage, utilities, car payments, groceries, and our student loans, there's just not much left." I trusted her with our finances. She had a business degree and had always been more organized than me with money. I was the type who would forget to check account balances, so having her handle the budget seemed like the responsible move. For years, I accepted her explanation. We cut back where we could, fewer dinners out, less expensive vacations, putting off home improvements. I picked up extra freelance work on weekends to help ease the strain. Beth would thank me for my hard work and reassure me that we were building toward a secure future together, even if progress was slower than we'd hoped. Everything changed last summer during a massive heat wave. Our air conditioner broke down, and the repair estimate was $12,800. When I suggested we use our emergency savings to cover it, Beth looked panicked. "We don't have that much in savings right now," she admitted. "The markets have been down and our investment account took a hit." This struck me as odd. We'd been putting money into that account monthly for years. It should have had well over $20,000 by my calculations, even with market fluctuations. When I asked to see the statements, Beth said she'd have to find them and quickly changed the subject. That night, unable to sleep in the sweltering heat, I started thinking about our finances more critically. I realized I hadn't actually seen a bank statement or investment account update in, I couldn't even remember how long. Beth always summarized them for me, showing me spreadsheets she'd created rather than the actual statements. The next day, while Beth was at work, I decided to look for our financial documents. I tried logging into our online banking, but the password had been changed. I called the bank, but they wouldn't give me information without the security answers, which Beth had set up. Increasingly concerned, I started searching the house. Nothing in her desk, nothing in the filing cabinet. Finally, I remembered the storage boxes in our attic. Climbing up there in 100-degree heat was miserable, but what I found made me forget all about the temperature. Hidden behind Christmas decorations was a lockbox I'd never seen before. It wasn't actually locked. Beth had apparently just used it for secure storage. Inside were bank statements, investment records, and a USB drive. The statements weren't from our joint account, but from an account in Beth's name, only at a different bank. As I flipped through them, I felt physically ill. For the past 4 years, Beth had been diverting approximately 30% of my direct deposits into this secret account before the money ever hit our joint account. My hands were shaking as I plugged the USB drive into my laptop. It contained spreadsheets detailing exactly how much she'd been skimming from my paychecks each month, along with the fake bank statements she had been creating to show me, statements that made it look like my full salary was going into our joint account. This woman had been meticulously calculating and documenting her own fraud. The level of premeditation required to pull off this scheme for years is chilling. It wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a calculated, ongoing betrayal. The secret account had a balance of over $120,000. $120,000 that should have been in our joint savings, that could have funded home repairs, vacations, or just given us breathing room instead of the constant financial stress I'd been feeling. I sat there in the sweltering attic for I don't know how long, trying to make sense of it all. Why would she do this? We had always talked about our future together. Having children, buying a vacation cabin, retiring early. Had that all been a lie? I made copies of everything I found and put the originals back exactly as I'd found them. Then I called a lawyer. My attorney advised me to gather more evidence before confronting Beth. Over the next week, I documented everything I could. I downloaded our tax returns, which showed our full income. I found emails Beth had sent me with the doctored financial statements. I even recorded a phone call with our bank confirming that my direct deposit had been modified years ago to split between 2 accounts. Then came the breaking point. While going through Beth's emails, yes, I had become that spouse who snoops through emails, but given the circumstances, I felt justified. I found correspondence between her and someone named Michael. The emails were romantic and included discussions of their future together, a future that apparently included a house they were planning to buy. There were links to real estate listings and discussions about neighborhoods. Beth wrote about how she was almost at her goal and would be free to start their life together soon. Michael, it turned out, was her personal trainer at the gym she'd been going to 4 times a week for the past 2 years. I decided to confront her that night. I made her favorite dinner, opened a bottle of wine, and waited until we were both relaxed before saying, "I need to ask you something important. Is there anything going on that you think I should know about?" She looked confused. "Like what? Like why 30% of my paycheck has been going into a secret account in your name for the past 4 years? The look on her face, that flash of panic followed by calculation as she tried to formulate a response, told me everything I needed to know. She started with denial. "I don't know what you're talking about." When I placed the bank statements on the table, she switched to minimization. "It's just a separate savings account I set up. I was going to surprise you when it reached a certain amount." When I added the emails with Michael to the pile, she finally broke down and admitted everything. She'd been unhappy for years but didn't have the courage to leave. She'd started the separate account as an exit fund and had connected with Michael about 18 months ago. They had been planning to buy a house together once she had enough saved for a down payment. "I was going to tell you everything next month," she claimed through tears. "I never wanted to hurt you." The cognitive dissonance required to steal from your spouse for years while planning your exit with another man and then claim you never wanted to hurt them is truly a spectacular feat of self-delusion. I asked her to leave that night. She went to her sisters, calling and texting repeatedly with explanations and apologies. I didn't respond to any of them. The next day, I contacted our bank with evidence of the fraud. Since Beth had forged documents to divert my direct deposits, they opened an investigation. I also filed for divorce, citing financial fraud and infidelity. What happened next? Nobody saw it coming. Beth tried to empty the secret account as soon as she realized I'd discovered it. Fortunately, my lawyer had anticipated this and had already filed for an emergency freeze on the assets. When Beth couldn't access the money, she panicked and tried to paint me as the financially abusive one to friends and family, claiming she had been forced to hide money for her own protection. But the evidence was overwhelming. I had documentation of every step of her scheme: the forged authorization to split my direct deposit, the falsified statements she'd created to show me, the years of deception. When presented with all of this during divorce proceedings, even her own attorney advised her to settle. The judge was not sympathetic to Beth's side of the story. In the final judgment, I was awarded the entire balance of the secret account plus additional damages for the fraud. Beth was ordered to pay my legal fees and now has garnished wages to repay what the court determined she still owed me beyond the seized account. It's been almost 2 years since the divorce was finalized. I've used some of the recovered money to finally get the therapy I needed to process this betrayal and rebuild my ability to trust. I've also taken a personal finance course and now manage my own money with a level of scrutiny I never thought I'd need. I've heard through mutual friends that Beth and Michael broke up shortly after our divorce was finalized. Apparently, he lost interest once she no longer had access to the small fortune she'd been skimming from me. She's still working at the same company, but had to downsize to a small apartment due to the wage garnishment. As for me, I've moved to a different city and started over. I'm dating again, cautiously, with a new understanding of how important financial transparency is in a relationship. I've been upfront about my past with new partners, and I'm slowly learning to trust again, with verification. The irony isn't lost on me that if Beth had simply asked for a divorce years ago, she would have been entitled to a fair settlement. Instead, her elaborate deception cost her everything, including her reputation and the relationship she was trying to fund with stolen money. Family betrayal hits different, and this next story about tax fraud will show you just how far some siblings will go. I had always trusted my brother Jason. Growing up, he was the person I looked up to the most, 4 years older, seemingly wiser, and always looking out for me. At least that's what I thought. Our relationship had its normal sibling friction, but nothing that ever made me doubt his character. That's why what happened blindsided me completely. My first hint that something was wrong came during tax season 2 years ago. I filed my taxes in February, expecting my modest refund within a few weeks like usual. Instead, I received a notice from the IRS that my return was being held for review. When I called to ask why, they told me there was a discrepancy they needed to investigate, but couldn't give me specifics. After weeks of back and forth and submitting additional documentation, I finally got my refund in May, much later than expected, and with no clear explanation of what the problem had been. I chalked it up to some random IRS glitch and moved on with my life. Fast forward to last year's tax season. I had moved to a new state for a job opportunity, bought my first condo, and was feeling pretty good about my financial independence. I was even working with a tax professional this time to make sure everything was perfect. That's when the bomb dropped. My tax preparer called me with confusion in her voice. "There seems to be an issue with your social security number," she explained. "According to the IRS system, you've been claimed as a dependent by someone else for the past several years." "That's impossible," I told her. "I'm 28 years old. I've been financially independent since college. I haven't lived with my parents in nearly 7 years." She suggested we file my return with additional documentation proving my independence and let the IRS sort it out. 3 weeks later, I received a letter stating I was being audited. The IRS wanted documentation of my housing, employment, and financial independence going back 6 years. During a call with an IRS agent to clarify what they needed, she let slip something that made my blood run cold. "We're seeing that you've been claimed as a dependent by Jason Matthews since 2016. Jason Matthews, my brother." My mind raced. Jason and I lived in different states. We saw each other maybe twice a year at family gatherings. There was no financial connection between us whatsoever. I hadn't even lived in the same state as him since college. I gathered every piece of documentation I could find: lease agreements, mortgage papers, utility bills, employment records, bank statements, anything that proved I had been supporting myself independently for years. I submitted everything to the IRS and waited. Meanwhile, I didn't confront Jason immediately. I wanted to be absolutely certain before making such a serious accusation. But I did start paying more attention to hints he might have dropped over the years. I remembered how he always seemed unusually interested in my W-2 forms when I'd mentioned getting them, how he'd asked for my new address to send a housewarming gift that never arrived when I bought my condo, how he'd offered to help me with my taxes several times, which I'd always declined. The IRS finally confirmed my suspicions. Jason had been claiming me as a dependent on his tax returns for 6 years, despite us living in different states with zero financial connection. He had been receiving thousands in tax benefits each year using my personal information. That's when everything unraveled. I called Jason, trying to keep my voice calm. "The IRS contacted me about my taxes," I said, not revealing what I knew. "Apparently, someone has been claiming me as their dependent. Any idea what that might be about?" There was a long pause before he responded. "Look, it's not a big deal," he said dismissively. "I've been claiming you as a dependent, but it's just a tax thing. You still got your refunds, right? Eventually?" The casual way he admitted to committing tax fraud against me for years left me speechless. The audacity to frame years of deliberate identity theft as just a tax thing is truly next-level delusion. "Are you serious right now?" I finally managed. "That's fraud, Jason. You've been stealing from me and the government. My returns have been delayed and flagged because of you." And here's where it gets absurd. He tried to justify it by claiming it was compensation for childhood sacrifices he'd made for me. "Do you know how many times I had to babysit you for free when we were kids?" he said, his voice rising. "How many times I drove you places before you had your license? I missed out on things because of you. This is just evening the score." I'm sorry, but the leap from "I occasionally watched my sibling as a teenager" to "I'm entitled to commit tax fraud for 6 years" is Olympic-level mental gymnastics. The level of entitlement required to think that normal sibling dynamics justify identity theft is genuinely staggering. I ended the call and immediately contacted the IRS to formally report the fraud. I provided all my documentation proving my independence and living situation. I also contacted my tax professional to help ensure everything was done correctly. When I told our parents what was happening, they initially couldn't believe Jason would do such a thing. They tried to minimize it, suggesting we could work it out as a family without getting the government involved. "He's your brother," my mum said. "I'm sure he didn't mean any harm. Maybe you two can come to some agreement." I stood firm. "This isn't a misunderstanding, Mum. He deliberately committed fraud using my personal information for years. There's no agreement to be made here." Then came the breaking point. While helping my parents organize their tax documents for their accountant, they're getting older and needed assistance, I discovered something that changed everything. There were discrepancies in their returns too, specifically around some investment accounts my father had set up years ago. Further investigation revealed that Jason had also been manipulating my parents' finances, though in a different way. He had been managing one of my father's investment accounts, but had actually been siphoning money from it for years. He had created fake statements showing growth while steadily draining the account. When my parents saw the evidence, their defense of Jason crumbled. They were devastated, not just by the financial betrayal, but by the methodical nature of his deception. My mother broke down crying, repeating, "How could he do this to his own family?" The IRS investigation into Jason's fraudulent returns concluded a few months ago. He now faces significant penalties and back taxes. The criminal investigation regarding the theft from my parents' accounts is ongoing, but he's likely facing charges there as well. As for me, I've completely overhauled my financial security. I've frozen my credit, changed all my personal identification documents, and set up fraud alerts on all my accounts. I've also established clear boundaries with my family about financial information. No sharing of tax documents, no discussion of specific investments, no offers to manage anything for each other. My relationship with my parents has actually improved through this ordeal. They've come to respect my independence and judgment more, especially since I was the one who uncovered Jason's manipulation of their finances. They've apologized repeatedly for initially defending him and have worked hard to make amends. Jason, however, has been essentially excommunicated from the family. He's made several attempts to contact us all with elaborate explanations and justifications for his actions, but none of us are interested in hearing them. The calculated, years-long nature of his deception is something none of us can move past. The whole experience has been a harsh lesson in trust, even within families. Sometimes the people who should protect you the most are the ones who exploit their access to harm you. I'm much more cautious now about who I trust with personal information, family or not. Just when you think people couldn't surprise you more, wait until you hear what this woman discovered about her girlfriend's secret dates. I was deployed with the Army Corps of Engineers in Afghanistan for what was supposed to be a 9-month tour. Before leaving, I'd been dating Emma for almost 2 years. We talked about getting engaged when I returned, and I'd even started saving for a ring. I thought we were solid. We video called whenever my schedule allowed, exchanged emails daily, and had built what I believed was a relationship that could withstand the distance. My mother lived about 20 minutes from the apartment Emma and I shared. Since my dad passed away 5 years ago, Mum had been living alone, and I worried about her getting lonely while I was deployed. I asked Emma if she could check in on Mum regularly, maybe have dinner with her once a week or so. Emma enthusiastically agreed, saying she loved my mother and would be happy to keep her company. The first few months of deployment went as well as could be expected. I'd get updates from both Emma and my mom about their get-togethers. Mom would tell me how Emma would come over for dinner, sometimes bringing groceries or helping with little tasks around the house. Emma would mention how much she enjoyed spending time with my mom, saying it made her feel closer to me while I was away. Around the 4th month, I started noticing something odd. Emma's availability for our video calls became increasingly unpredictable. She'd miss scheduled calls and apologize later, saying she'd fallen asleep or her phone had died. This wasn't like her, but I tried to be understanding. Maintaining a relationship during a deployment is hard on both people. Mom's updates started to include casual mentions of Emma and her friend coming over for dinner. When I asked Emma about these friends, she'd say they were co-workers or old classmates who were helping her cope with my absence. She explained that having other people around sometimes made the loneliness easier to bear, and Mom seemed to enjoy the company too. It made sense, and I was actually grateful that Emma had support while I was gone. Then came an unexpected break. A project I was overseeing finished ahead of schedule, and my commanding officer approved a 2-week early return. I decided not to tell Emma or my mom, wanting to surprise them both. When I arrived home, I went straight to our apartment, but Emma wasn't there. It was a Friday evening around 7 p.m., a time she was usually home. I texted her asking casually what she was up to, without revealing I was back. She replied that she was just staying in tonight, watching Netflix and missing you. I was confused and, I'll admit, immediately suspicious. I went to our neighbor Dave, who I'd known for years, and asked if he'd seen Emma. "Oh, she's probably at your mum's," he said casually. "She goes there a lot, especially on weekends, usually with different friends. Nice that they're keeping your mum company while you're away." Something about the way he said different friends sent a chill through me. I thanked him and headed to my mother's house. When I pulled up, I noticed an unfamiliar car in the driveway alongside Emma's. I rang the doorbell instead of using my key, wanting to maintain the element of surprise. My mother opened the door and her face went through a series of rapid emotions. Joy at seeing me, followed immediately by confusion and then what looked like panic. Before she could say anything, I heard laughter from the living room. Emma's distinctive laugh accompanied by a male voice I didn't recognize. "Who's here, Carol?" the male voice called out. I gently moved past my mother into the living room, where I found Emma cuddled up on the couch with a man I'd never seen before. They were sharing a glass of wine, her legs draped over his, looking completely comfortable in what was clearly more than a friendly position. The look on Emma's face when she saw me standing there in my uniform would have been almost comical if it wasn't so heartbreaking. Pure shock, followed by guilt, with no attempt to even move away from the man she was cozied up with. "James," she gasped, You're not supposed to be home for 2 more weeks." That's the defense she went with. Not that it wasn't what it looked like, not that there was an explanation, but that I wasn't supposed to catch her yet. The sheer audacity of being upset about the timing of getting caught, rather than the betrayal itself, is a special kind of shameless. "Clearly I should have called ahead," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. The man finally seemed to understand the situation and stood up awkwardly. I should probably go," he mumbled, grabbing his jacket. "Who are you?" I asked him directly. He looked at Emma, then back at me. "I'm Brendan. I work with Emma. She didn't tell me she had a boyfriend overseas. She said you two broke up before deployment." And here's where it gets absurd. Emma jumped in, trying to manage the situation like it was a minor scheduling conflict, rather than me catching her on a date in my mother's living room. "James, let me explain. Brendan and I are just friends. I've been having a hard time while you've been gone, and—" My mother, who had been standing silently by the door, interrupted. "Stop it, Emma. Just stop." Her voice was shaking. "James, she's been bringing different men here for months. She told me they were friends helping her cope with missing you." Emma shot my mother a look of pure betrayal, as if my mum was the one doing something wrong by telling the truth. That's when everything unraveled. Through tears, my mother explained how Emma had been using her house as a comfortable setting for her dates. She'd manipulate my mom into cooking meals and creating a homey atmosphere that Emma apparently couldn't achieve in our apartment. She told my mother these men were just friends supporting her through the deployment, and my mom, wanting to help the woman she thought would eventually be her daughter-in-law, had welcomed them. "I thought I was helping," Mom said, her voice breaking. "I thought I was making things easier for both of you." Emma tried to defend herself, claiming she had been lonely and confused, but still loved me. She insisted none of these friendships meant anything and begged for another chance. This woman had not only cheated repeatedly, but had manipulated my mother into being an unwitting accomplice, using the home where I grew up as the setting for her affairs. The level of calculation required to turn my mother's kindness and concern into a cover for cheating is genuinely disturbing. I ended the relationship on the spot, telling Emma to be out of our apartment by the following day. I would stay with my mother and give her time to pack her things. She cried and pleaded, but both my mother and I remained firm. The aftermath was messy and painful. My mother was devastated, feeling she had unknowingly facilitated Emma's betrayal. She kept apologizing, though none of it was her fault. She had been manipulated by someone she trusted. "I served them dinner," she told me later, still in disbelief. "I washed dishes while they cuddled on the couch. I showed them photo albums of you growing up while she was—" The revelation that my mother had been so thoroughly used hit me almost as hard as Emma's betrayal. My mom had always been kind and welcoming, and Emma had exploited that kindness in the most hurtful way possible. Through mutual friends, I later learned that Emma had been bringing different men to my mother's house at least twice a month throughout my deployment. She apparently told these men various stories. To some, she was single. To others, she was in an open relationship. To a few, like Brendan, she claimed to be recently broken up from a military boyfriend. What happened next? Nobody saw it coming. After moving her things out, Emma launched a campaign to salvage her reputation among our mutual friends. She told people I had cheated on her first, during deployment, untrue, that we had an understanding about seeing other people while I was away, also untrue, and even tried to suggest my mother was confused and had misinterpreted innocent friendships. Fortunately, our friends knew better. Several had suspected something was off with Emma's behavior while I was away, but hadn't wanted to worry me during deployment. One friend admitted she had seen Emma with another man at a restaurant, but hadn't known how to tell me. My relationship with my mother needed repair as well. Though I never blamed her, she carried tremendous guilt. We eventually started seeing a family therapist together, which helped her process her feelings of being used and betrayed. The therapist helped us establish healthier boundaries and rebuild the trust that Emma had damaged. It took time, but my mum and I are closer than ever now. We've turned Friday dinners into our special tradition, just the two of us rebuilding positive memories in the space that had been tainted by Emma's deception. As for me, I've moved on. About a year after returning from deployment, I joined a veterans support group and met Alyssa, who works as a physical therapist with military personnel. We've been dating for 8 months now, taking things slowly and building a foundation of honest communication. She's come to Friday dinners with Mom a few times, and the three of us have developed a genuine friendship. I've learned that while distance can strain a relationship, it doesn't cause someone to repeatedly cheat and manipulate the people who care about them. That comes from a much deeper character flaw, and I've learned that family, even when they've been hurt, can be the strongest support system during the most difficult times. If family betrayals upset you, this final story about parents and an ex-partner will leave you speechless. Tyler and I had been together for 5 years before I discovered he was cheating. I found out in the most cliché way possible. A text message notification popped up on his phone while he was in the shower. It was from someone named Amber, and it read, "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again Friday." When I confronted him, he tried denying it at first, claiming Amber was a co-worker and they'd been working on a project together. But as I pushed harder, his story fell apart. Eventually, he admitted he'd been seeing Amber for nearly 3 months. The pain of betrayal was overwhelming, but I was determined to handle it with dignity. I broke things off cleanly, packed my things, and moved to a new city about 4 hours away, where I'd been offered a job earlier that month. It seemed like the perfect opportunity for a fresh start. My parents were supportive during the breakup, or so I thought. They called regularly to check in, sent care packages, and generally seemed concerned about my well-being. I was grateful for their support, especially since the move meant I was farther away from my entire support network. About 6 months after the breakup, I was on a video call with my parents. They were in the living room of their house, the same house I'd grown up in. During the call, my dad got up to get something from the kitchen, and my mum followed him, saying she needed to check on dinner. They left their laptop open in the living room so I could see into the hallway that led to the bedrooms. As the laptop sat there, I noticed someone walk past in the background. It was just a glimpse, but it looked oddly familiar. A few minutes later, my parents returned, but I was distracted, wondering who else was in their house. "Is someone else there?" I asked casually. My mum looked startled for a moment before composing herself. "Oh, just a tenant. We've been renting out your old room for some extra income." That made sense. I'd moved out years ago, and the room was just sitting empty. It was smart of them to make use of the space. The call continued normally, but something felt off. Later that evening, I was looking through photos from the video call that I'd automatically saved. I had a habit of taking screenshots during our calls to keep memories, and I noticed something in one of the frames. In the background, on the shelf in the hallway, was a familiar blue coffee mug, Tyler's favorite mug, the one he'd left behind when we broke up because it was still at my parents' house from our last visit. It could have been a coincidence. Lots of people have blue coffee mugs, but combined with my parents' odd reaction when I asked about their tenant, it planted a seed of suspicion. I decided to visit my parents unannounced the following weekend. I told them I had a work trip to a neighboring town and would be too busy to stop by, ensuring they wouldn't expect me. When I arrived at their house on Saturday morning, I used my key to let myself in quietly. The house seemed empty at first, but then I heard movement from upstairs, from my old bedroom. I stood frozen in the entryway, listening as footsteps crossed the floor above me. I crept up the stairs, my heart pounding. The door to my childhood bedroom was partially open, and through the crack I could see someone moving around inside. When the person turned, I got a clear view of their face. It was Tyler. I pushed the door open fully. "What the hell are you doing here?" He jumped, clearly shocked to see me. "Emma, what? Your parents didn't mention you were coming." "Clearly," I replied, taking in the scene. My old bedroom had been completely transformed into Tyler's living space. His clothes hung in my closet. His laptop sat on my desk. His books lined my shelves, mixed in with the childhood mementos I'd left behind. But that wasn't even the worst part. On the nightstand was a stack of my old journals. Journals I'd kept throughout high school and college, filled with my most private thoughts and feelings. They were supposed to be stored in a box in my closet, but it was obvious they'd been removed and read. Some even had bookmarks in them. "How long have you been living here?" I demanded. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "About 6 months. right after you moved. 6 months. He had moved in immediately after our breakup, while I was starting a new life in a new city, trying to heal from his betrayal. He had been living in my childhood bedroom, sleeping in my old bed, going through my personal belongings. The front door opened downstairs, and I heard my parents' voices as they returned from what was apparently a grocery run. When they came upstairs and found me standing in Tyler's, my room, the looks on their faces confirmed everything. They knew exactly what they'd done. "We can explain," my dad started, but I cut him off. "Explain what? That you've been renting my room to my ex? The one who cheated on me? That you've been letting him go through my personal things?" My mother tried to defuse the situation. "Honey, Tyler was in a tough spot after you left. He lost his apartment." "After I left?" I interrupted. "You mean after he cheated on me for 3 months and I ended the relationship?" "People make mistakes," my dad said, as if he was talking about Tyler forgetting to take out the trash rather than carrying on an affair behind my back. And here's where it gets absurd. They actually tried to frame this as some kind of well-intentioned matchmaking attempt. "We just thought if he had some time to reflect, and if you two could talk again, maybe you could work things out," my mum explained. "You were together for 5 years, Emma. That's not something to throw away lightly." The absolute gall to decide that my completely justified reason for ending a relationship wasn't valid enough for them to respect. Imagine thinking your adult daughter doesn't have the right to decide when a relationship is over, especially after being cheated on. I started opening drawers, looking for anything else of mine that might have been disturbed. In my dad's desk in the corner, I found a folder with my name on it. Inside were copies of my new address, my work schedule, even directions to my new apartment, all clearly prepared for Tyler's use. "You've been giving him my personal information?" I asked, holding up the folder. "My address, my work details? Do you have any idea how invasive that is?" My parents looked at each other guiltily. "We were just trying to help you both," my mum insisted. "You are so perfect together, and Tyler has been so remorseful." Tyler, who had been quiet during this exchange, finally spoke up. "Your parents have been really supportive, Emma. They helped me see how much I messed up. I've been trying to figure out the best way to approach you again, to show you how much I've changed." That's when everything unraveled. Tyler pulled out his phone and showed me texts from my parents updating him about my life. When I'd mentioned dating someone new, when I'd had a bad day at work, even details about a minor health issue I'd mentioned to them in confidence. For 6 months, my parents had been acting as spies, feeding information about my new life to the ex who had betrayed me, all while letting him live among my childhood possessions, read my private journals, and plan some kind of ambush reconciliation. The level of boundary violation here is so extreme, it feels like the plot of a psychological thriller. These aren't just helicopter parents, they're full-on surveillance drones with a matchmaking mission. I told Tyler he had 24 hours to find somewhere else to stay. Then I started gathering all my remaining belongings, journals, keepsakes, photo albums, anything personal that I didn't want him or my parents pouring through. My mother tried to stop me, saying I was overreacting, but I was beyond listening. "You betrayed my trust," I told them as I packed. "You took my biggest heartbreak and decided to nurture it right in the center of what should have been my safe space, my childhood home." I left with 4 boxes of belongings and a shattered relationship with my parents. I blocked their numbers and emails for 3 months, only agreeing to limited contact after they sent a handwritten letter of apology that seemed genuinely remorseful. Eventually, after about 6 months of silence, I agreed to try family therapy. It wasn't easy, and there were sessions where I seriously considered giving up. But slowly we began to rebuild some semblance of a relationship, one with much clearer boundaries. As for Tyler, I heard through mutual friends that he moved in with Amber. Yes, the same woman he'd cheated with. Apparently, she's now paranoid because my parents still have a spare key to their apartment that Tyler gave them, just in case. She's been pressuring him to change the locks, worried that my parents might let themselves in to snoop or worse. It's been nearly 2 years since the confrontation. My relationship with my parents is still a work in progress, but they've respected my boundaries since we re-established contact. They've stopped asking about my dating life entirely, which is honestly a relief. The whole experience taught me that sometimes the people who claim to want what's best for you actually just want what they think is best, regardless of your own feelings or decisions. I've become much more careful about what personal information I share, even with family, and I've learned that it's okay to establish firm boundaries with the people who raised you. Sometimes I still have trouble believing my parents thought what they were doing was helpful rather than deeply invasive and hurtful. But I've come to understand that in their misguided way, they really thought they were doing the right thing. That doesn't excuse their actions, but it has helped me find a path toward forgiveness, with healthy distance maintained. Outro. If you've made it through these stories of betrayal and deception, you're officially a Reddit drama connoisseur. Sweet dreams, everyone, and remember to lock your phones, check your bank statements, and maybe think twice about who you trust with your secrets. Next week, we'll dive into stories of revenge that went perfectly right, or terribly wrong. Which of today's betrayals shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments.